The Habit Paradox. Act 1. The Awakening. The Experiment. Before we begin, I need you to do something for me. For the next 30 seconds, I want you to think about anything you want. Your day, your goals, what you're having for dinner, absolutely anything. There's just one rule. Don't think about a pink elephant. Whatever you do not picture a pink elephant in your mind right now. Don't imagine its large, floppy ears. Don't think about its wrinkled pink skin. Don't visualize its trunk swaying back and forth. Just don't think about it. Not thinking about it right now, are you? You thought about the elephant, didn't you? Of course you did. And that's not a failure of willpower. That's neuroscience. This phenomenon is called ironic process theory, discovered by psychologist Daniel Wegner in the 1980s. When you try to suppress a thought, your brain actually has to monitor for that thought to make sure you're not thinking it, which means you're constantly reminding yourself of the exact thing you're trying to avoid. This is why 92% of New Year's resolutions fail by February. People try to quit social media by thinking, "Don't check Instagram." They try to eat healthy by thinking, "Don't eat that cookie." They try to exercise by thinking, "Don't skip the gym." And their brain hears, Instagram, cookie, skip the gym. You're fighting your own biology. And here's the thing. It gets so much weirder than this. The habit paradox. Why everything you know is keeping you stuck. A masterclass in human behavior. The lie we've been sold. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. The self-improvement industry is worth over $10 billion. 10 billion. And it's built on a lie. Actually, several lies. But there's one lie that's more destructive than all the others combined. Just do it. Just do it. Just start. Just take action. Just push through. Just be disciplined. This is terrible advice. And I'm going to prove it to you. Think about the last time someone told you to just do something difficult. Just wake up earlier. Just stop procrastinating. Just eat better. Just go to the gym. How did that work out? If you're like most people, you probably felt one of two things. Either immediate shame because you couldn't just do it, or temporary motivation that lasted about 36 hours before reality set in. Here's why just do it fails. And this is where it gets fascinating. Your brain is not a single unified system. It's more like a committee, and different parts of that committee want different things. The prefrontal cortex, the rational planning part of your brain, loves the idea of waking up at 5 a.m. It sees the benefits. It makes the plan. It sets the alarm. But at 5 a.m., a different part of your brain is in charge. The limbic system. The ancient, survival-oriented part that says, we're tired, it's dark, and this is not a threat worth responding to. Just do it. Assumes these two parts of your brain are having a conversation. They're not. They're having a war. And here's the critical part. Willpower is not a personality trait. It's a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. This isn't motivational theory. This is neuroscience. For years, researchers believed in something called ego depletion, the idea that willpower works like a muscle that gets tired. And while the original studies have been questioned, the fundamental truth remains. Decision fatigue is real. Every time you resist a temptation, you're burning glucose. You're literally using brain fuel. So when someone tells you to just resist checking your phone, just skip the donut, just go for a run after an exhausting workday, they're asking you to drain a tank that's already running on empty. But it gets worse. Let me tell you about 3 viral myths that have destroyed more progress than you can imagine. Myth number 1, the 21-day habit myth. You've heard this. It takes 21 days to form a habit. 3 weeks and you're golden. Where did this come from? In 1960, a plastic surgeon named Maxwell Maltz published a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. He noticed that his patients took about 21 days to get used to their new faces after surgery. 21 days to adjust to seeing a different person in the mirror. Somehow, this observation got twisted, repeated, and became gospel truth about all habit formation. The actual science? In 2009, researcher Philippa Lally studied habit formation and found the real number, anywhere from 18 to 254 days, with an average of 66 days. 66 days, not 21. And that's for simple habits like drinking a glass of water. Complex habits? Much longer. People quit on day 22 thinking something's wrong with them. Nothing's wrong with them. They were just lied to. Myth number 2, the willpower tank. The idea that you have a fixed amount of willpower that depletes throughout the day has been deeply embedded in popular psychology. And while decision fatigue is real, recent research has revealed something incredible. Belief matters more than depletion. Studies by Carol Dweck and others have shown that people who believe willpower is unlimited don't experience the same depletion effects as people who believe it's limited. Your belief about willpower affects your actual willpower, which means the real problem isn't that you ran out of discipline, it's that you believed you would. Myth number 3, motivation comes first. This is the big one. We've been taught that the sequence is feel motivated, take action, get results. But that's backwards. The actual sequence is take action, see results, feel motivated. Motivation is not a cause. It's an effect. Think about it. Have you ever felt motivated to do something you've never done before? Number. You feel curious, interested, maybe even excited about the idea. But motivation, real, driving, energizing motivation, comes after you've experienced success. You don't feel motivated to play guitar until you can play a song. You don't feel motivated to exercise until you feel the endorphin rush. You don't feel motivated to write until you've written something you're proud of. Waiting to feel motivated is like waiting to feel wealthy before you start saving money. It's backwards. So if just do it doesn't work, if 21 days is a lie, if willpower is more complex than we thought, and if motivation follows action, what actually works? That's what the next 3 hours are about. But first, I need to show you something that's going to change the way you see your entire day. The invisible prison. Here's a question I want you to consider carefully. How much of your day do you think is actually yours? By that I mean, how much of what you do is the result of conscious, intentional decision-making? Take a guess, a percentage. Most people guess around 70%, maybe 60% if they're feeling honest. The actual number, according to research from Harvard and Duke University, is somewhere between 43 and 47%. Less than half. More than half of everything you do today, what you ate, where you looked, what you thought about, how you responded to stress, was automatic. You didn't decide. You defaulted. You're running on autopilot more than you're flying the plane. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that shook the foundations of what we think about free will. He asked participants to perform a simple action, flex their wrist, whenever they felt like it. Just a spontaneous decision. He measured 2 things: when they became consciously aware of their decision to move, and when their brain actually initiated the movement. The result? The brain initiated the movement about half a second before the person became aware of deciding to move. Half a second. Your brain decided. Then, half a second later, you became aware of the decision and thought, I made that choice. Now, this doesn't mean free will is completely an illusion. The interpretation is more nuanced than that. But it does mean something profound. Most of what you think of as you deciding is actually your brain creating a narrative after the fact. You're the narrator, not the author. And habits? Habits are the ghostwriter. Let me give you a real-world example of this in action. In the 1990s, Procter & Gamble developed a product called Febreze. It was a revolutionary odor eliminator. It actually worked. They were certain it would be a massive success. It failed. Spectacularly. They did market research and discovered something fascinating. People with the worst odors, chain smokers, owners of multiple cats, didn't smell the problem anymore. Their noses had adapted. They had no reason to buy Febreze because they didn't think they needed it. So P&G went back to the lab, not to improve the product, but to change the habit. They added a subtle perfume scent and repositioned Febreze not as an odor eliminator, but as the final step in a cleaning routine. The pleasant reward at the end. They created a cue, cleaning your space. They created a routine, spray Febreze. They created a reward, the fresh scent. They engineered a habit loop where none existed before. Sales exploded. This is happening to you constantly. Grocery stores are designed to manipulate your habits. The milk is always at the back, forcing you to walk past everything else. The most profitable items are at eye level. The candy is at the checkout where your decision fatigue is highest. Casinos are habit engineering on steroids. No clocks, no windows. Chips instead of cash to psychologically distance you from the value. Intermittent rewards. Sometimes you win, usually you don't. Which creates the strongest form of behavioral conditioning known to psychology. Your smartphone is the most sophisticated habit creation device ever invented. The variable rewards of notifications. The infinite scroll that prevents closure. The red badges that trigger urgency. The autoplay that removes the decision point. Every major tech company employs behavioral psychologists to make their apps more addictive. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a job description. And it works because of a specific part of your brain called the basal ganglia. This is your habit center. It's ancient. It evolved long before the prefrontal cortex that makes you you. The basal ganglia's job is to automate behavior to save energy. Because thinking is expensive. Your brain uses about 20% of your body's energy, despite being only 2% of your body weight. It's an energy hog. So whenever possible, your brain wants to offload decisions to the automatic system. And here's the truly wild part. Once the basal ganglia takes over, habits continue even when the reward stops. Researchers taught rats to run a maze to get chocolate. After the habit formed, they poisoned the chocolate so the rats would get sick. The rats knew the chocolate was poison. When offered the chocolate directly, they refused it. But when they ran the maze, they still went for the chocolate. The habit was stronger than the knowledge. This has been observed in humans too. People who lose their memory, like patient HM, who had his hippocampus removed, can still perform habits they learned before their memory loss. They can't remember learning. They can't remember practicing. But the habit remains. You can lose your memory, but keep your habits. Because habits don't live in your memory. They live in a different system entirely. Think about that for a moment. The things you do every day, the route you take to work, the way you respond when stressed, the food you reach for when tired, these aren't really choices anymore. They're programs, running in the background, without your permission. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You probably don't even know what all your habits are. When's the last time you consciously decided which leg to put into your pants first when getting dressed? You didn't. You defaulted. When's the last time you decided how to hold your phone, which thumb to scroll with, how many times to check it per hour? You didn't decide. You automated. The person you are is largely a collection of habits you accumulated, many of which you adopted unconsciously from your environment, your family, your culture. You think you're the driver, but most of the time, you're the passenger watching a recording of a trip you already took. Now, before this starts feeling dystopian, here's the good news. If habits can be engineered by grocery stores, casinos, and tech companies, they can be engineered by you. If your brain is running programs without your conscious input, you can write better programs. The habits that control your life, you didn't choose most of them, but you can choose your next ones. That's what this is about. Not fighting your brain, not overriding the system, becoming the architect of the system. But first, you need to understand exactly how deep this goes. Your secret second brain. Let me tell you about the most powerful part of your brain that you've probably never heard of. The basal ganglia. It sits near the center of your brain, wrapped around the top of your brainstem. It's ancient. Evolutionarily, it's one of the oldest parts of your brain. Reptiles have it. Birds have it. It existed long before consciousness as we understand it. And it runs your life. The basal ganglia is your autopilot, your second brain, the thing that takes complex sequences of behavior and compresses them into single chunks. Think about tying your shoes. When you were 5 years old, this was an enormously complex task. Cross the laces, make a loop, wrap around, pull through. Your prefrontal cortex was working overtime. You had to concentrate. Now, you can tie your shoes while having a conversation, thinking about something else entirely, maybe even in the dark. What happened? The basal ganglia chunked the behavior. It took all those individual steps and compressed them into one automatic sequence. One signal. Tie shoes. And the whole program runs. This is called chunking, and it's how your brain creates efficiency. It happens with everything you practice repeatedly. Driving, typing, brushing your teeth, your morning routine. And here's what makes this remarkable. When a behavior is fully habitual, your brain barely fires at all. MIT researcher Anne Graybiel discovered this through brain imaging studies. When rats first learned a maze, their brains showed intense activity throughout the entire process. But after the behavior became habitual, brain activity only spiked at the beginning and end of the behavior, at the cue and the reward. The middle, the actual behavior, became almost neurologically silent. The rats were doing the behavior, but their brains weren't really thinking about it. This is why you can drive home and not remember the drive. Your basal ganglia did it. Your conscious mind was elsewhere. This is incredible for efficiency. A fully automated habit uses about 90% less brain energy than conscious decision-making. 90%. Your brain loves this. It's obsessed with efficiency, so it's constantly looking for patterns to automate. And this is where it gets really interesting. When brain researchers study experts, concert pianists, professional athletes, master surgeons, they find something counterintuitive. Experts show less brain activity than beginners when performing their skill. Not more. Less. The expert pianist's brain is quieter than the amateur's. The professional basketball player's brain is more efficient than the rookie's. Because expertise is automated excellence. The behavior has been chunked so thoroughly that it runs with minimal conscious oversight. This is beautiful. This is how you become capable of extraordinary things. But it's also dangerous. Because the basal ganglia doesn't distinguish between good habits and bad habits. It doesn't have values. It doesn't have goals. It just automates patterns. If you repeatedly eat cookies when stressed, the basal ganglia automates that. If you repeatedly check your phone when bored, the basal ganglia automates that. If you repeatedly procrastinate when facing difficult tasks, the basal ganglia automates that. And once something is automated, it becomes incredibly difficult to change through willpower alone. Because you're fighting a system that doesn't respond to logic or motivation. You're fighting a system that responds to repetition and reward. Here's the truly eerie part. Remember those rats running the maze for chocolate? The ones who still went for the poisoned chocolate because the habit was so strong? Researchers dug deeper. They found that once a habit is fully formed, it continues even if the reward is completely removed. Not just poisoned, gone entirely. The rats would run the maze with no chocolate at all. The behavior had become entirely independent of the outcome. This happens in humans too. You've probably experienced this. You open the refrigerator even though you're not hungry. You check your phone even though there's no notification. You bite your nails even though it doesn't feel good. The habit runs because the cue triggered it, not because you want the reward. This is why people say things like, "I don't even enjoy smoking anymore, but I can't stop." The habit has become dissociated from the pleasure. It's just running, automatically, below consciousness. The basal ganglia is the reason you can walk into a room and forget why you went there. The cue that triggered the behavior happened in the previous room. Without the cue, the habit stalls. It's the reason you can't remember if you locked the door. You did it on autopilot, so the memory never formed consciously. It's the reason you can break a bad habit for weeks, and then suddenly, in a moment of stress or distraction, find yourself doing it again without even realizing it until it's over. The program is still there, waiting for the cue. Now, if this sounds frightening, take a breath, because this is also how transformation happens. Every single positive change in your life happened because you successfully installed a new program in your basal ganglia. Learning to read, riding a bike, social skills, professional expertise, emotional regulation, all of it started as effortful, conscious work. All of it became automatic through repetition. The basal ganglia is not your enemy. It's your most powerful ally, but only if you understand how to program it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. But before we get to the how, I need to show you the dark side that no one talks about. The dark side. No one talks about. We need to talk about when habits go wrong, because here's what the self-help industry won't tell you. Habits can become prisons. Not every habit is empowering. Not every automatic behavior is serving you. Sometimes the thing running in your basal ganglia is destroying your life. Let's start with the clinical perspective. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, is essentially the habit loop on overdrive. A person with OCD experiences an intrusive thought. That's the cue. They perform a compulsion, washing hands, checking locks, counting, arranging. That's the routine. They experience temporary relief from anxiety. That's the reward. The loop reinforces. The compulsion becomes more frequent, more urgent, more uncontrollable. It's a habit loop that's hijacked the system. The basal ganglia is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, automating a behavior that gets reinforced. But the behavior is destroying the person's quality of life. This isn't a metaphor. OCD shows hyperactivity in the basal ganglia on brain scans. Addiction works the same way. The cue: stress, social situation, location, time of day. The routine: use the substance. The reward: temporary relief, pleasure, numbness, connection. The loop strengthens. And here's the cruel part. Over time, the reward diminishes, but the habit strengthens. You need more to feel less. Eventually, you're not using to feel good. You're using to feel normal. Because not using triggers withdrawal, and the habit loop says, the solution to this discomfort is the substance. The basal ganglia doesn't know it's killing you. It just knows the pattern works. Trauma responses are survival habits. When something threatens you, emotionally, physically, your brain creates a protective response. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That's useful in the moment. But if the threat keeps happening, especially in childhood, that response becomes automated. The basal ganglia learns. In this type of situation, we freeze, we dissociate, we people please, we become hypervigilant. And then, decades later, in situations that aren't actually dangerous, the program still runs. You know intellectually that you're safe, but your body is reacting like you're not. That's a trauma habit, and it's heartbreakingly difficult to change because it exists below conscious thought. This is why I get frustrated with toxic positivity in the habit space. The people who say, just think positive, or just build good habits, or you can change anything with enough discipline. Number. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you need therapy. Sometimes you need medication. Sometimes you need professional intervention. Because some habit loops aren't productivity problems. They're mental health crises. And telling someone whose basal ganglia is stuck in a trauma response to just build better habits is not only unhelpful, it's harmful. It adds shame on top of suffering. So let me be clear, if you're struggling with OCD, addiction, severe anxiety, depression, eating disorders, self-harm, or unresolved trauma, this video is not a replacement for professional help. Habits are powerful, but they're not magic. Some habits need to be addressed with support, not just strategies. That said, and this is important, even in those situations, understanding how habits work can be part of the solution. Because therapy often involves breaking destructive habit loops and building healthier ones. Cognitive behavioral therapy is largely about identifying automatic thought patterns, mental habits, and replacing them with more adaptive ones. Exposure therapy is about breaking the avoidance habit by creating a new association with the feared stimulus. Addiction recovery involves replacing the substance habit with healthier coping habits. So this information is relevant. It's just not sufficient on its own. Now, let's talk about depression. Depression does something insidious to habits. One of the hallmark symptoms of depression is anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. Remember the habit loop? Cue, routine, reward. Depression breaks the reward. You do something that used to feel good, exercise, socializing, hobbies, and you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel exhausted by it. So the habit loop doesn't reinforce. The behavior stops. And then you get caught in a vicious cycle. You stop doing things that used to bring you joy, which makes you more depressed, which makes it harder to do those things, which makes you more depressed. The habits that kept you functional, showering, eating well, going outside, start to dissolve. And then people around you say, just go for a walk, you'll feel better. And they're not wrong. Behavioral activation, doing the thing even when you don't feel like it, is one of the most effective interventions for depression. But it's not just anything. When your brain's reward system is suppressed, building habits is exponentially harder. So if you're dealing with depression and struggling to maintain habits, please hear this. You're not lazy. You're not weak. You're not lacking discipline. Your brain chemistry is making the habit loop dysfunctional. That's a medical issue, not a character flaw. And understanding that, really understanding that, is crucial. Because the shame makes it worse. The judgment makes it worse. The belief that you should be able to just do it makes it worse. What actually helps is self-compassion combined with behavioral strategies, combined with professional support when needed. Now, here's why I'm spending time on this. Because for too long, the conversation around habits has been dominated by people who don't acknowledge these realities. The productivity gurus, the motivational speakers, the people who made it sound like building habits is just a matter of wanting it enough. And that narrative has caused enormous harm. It's made people feel broken when the real issue is that they're trying to apply beginner strategies to expert-level challenges, or they're trying to use habits to fix problems that require deeper healing. So before we go any further into the how-to, I want to establish this. Habits are powerful, but they're not a cure-all. Some habits need to be broken with compassion, not force. Some situations need support, not strategies. And the goal isn't to optimize yourself into a productivity robot. The goal is to build a life that feels sustainable, meaningful, and aligned with who you actually are, not who you think you should be. Now, with that foundation, we can move forward, because understanding the dark side makes you more effective at the bright side. And we're about to enter territory that's going to flip everything you thought you knew about discipline, motivation, and willpower. The paradoxes are where the real power lives. Act 2. The paradoxes. The discipline paradox. Here's a question that's going to sound strange. What if disciplined people aren't actually disciplined? Stay with me. When you think of someone who's highly disciplined, someone who wakes up early, exercises daily, eats healthy, stays productive, what do you imagine is happening inside their head? Most people imagine a constant battle, a voice saying, I don't want to do this, and another voice saying, do it anyway. And the disciplined person, through sheer force of will, choosing the hard thing over and over. That's not what's happening. In 2012, researchers Wilhelm Hoffmann and Roy Baumeister conducted a fascinating study. They gave people beepers that went off at random times throughout the day and asked them to report, are you experiencing a desire or temptation right now? Are you resisting it? They tracked hundreds of people over multiple days. Here's what they found. The people who appeared most disciplined, who consistently made healthy choices, stayed productive, avoided bad habits, reported experiencing fewer temptations than everyone else. Not more willpower, fewer temptations. They weren't winning the battle. They weren't in a battle at all. This is the discipline paradox. People who seem disciplined have structured their lives so they need less discipline. They're not more virtuous. They're more strategic. Let me break this down. If you have to use willpower to resist eating junk food, you've already lost. Because willpower is a limited resource, and eventually you'll run out. But if you don't have junk food in your house, you don't need willpower. The battle never happens. If you have to force yourself to go to the gym, you'll eventually fail. But if you have a workout buddy waiting for you, or gym clothes laid out, or a gym on your way home from work, the friction is reduced so dramatically that discipline barely enters the equation. The disciplined person isn't fighting harder. They're fighting less. They've designed their environment, their schedule, their social circle, and their defaults to make the right choice the easy choice. This is deeply counterintuitive because we've been taught that discipline is about strength, about toughness, about forcing yourself to do hard things. But that's the amateur approach. The professional approach is to make hard things easy. Think about it in terms of physics. Objects in motion stay in motion. Objects at rest stay at rest. If you're starting from zero every single day, deciding whether to work out, deciding whether to eat healthy, deciding whether to be productive, you're fighting inertia constantly. But if you've already started, continuation is easier than initiation. This is why morning routines are so powerful. Not because there's something magical about mornings, but because you're making one decision that triggers a chain of automated behaviors. You're not deciding to meditate, then deciding to exercise, then deciding to have a healthy breakfast. You're deciding to start the routine, and the rest flows. Navy SEALs have a principle called default to action. It means, when in doubt, move. Because taking action, any action, breaks the paralysis of overthinking. It puts you in motion, and once you're in motion, continuing is easier than starting. This is why the just put on your gym clothes hack works. Not because gym clothes are magical, but because you've reduced the activation energy. You've started the motion. Now let's talk about decision fatigue. Barack Obama, during his presidency, wore only gray or blue suits. He said, "I don't want to make decisions about what I'm eating or wearing because I have too many other decisions to make." Mark Zuckerberg wears the same gray t-shirt every day for the same reason. Steve Jobs had his black turtleneck. This isn't a fashion statement. It's a cognitive strategy. Every decision you make depletes your mental resources slightly. Most decisions are tiny: what to wear, what to eat, which route to take, but they add up. By the end of the day, you've made thousands of micro decisions, and your capacity for making good decisions is diminished. This is why you eat healthy all day and then raid the pantry at night. Not because you lack discipline, because you're decision fatigued. The disciplined person eliminates decisions. They automate breakfast. They lay out clothes the night before. They batch similar tasks. They create routines that remove decision points. They're being lazy in the smartest way possible. And here's where this gets really interesting. The monk mode fallacy. There's this idea in productivity culture that you need to isolate yourself, remove all distractions, enter this state of monastic discipline where you're grinding alone in complete focus. And yes, sometimes deep work requires isolation. But sustainable discipline? That requires integration, not isolation. Because the monk who meditates in a cave for years hasn't actually built discipline. He's built a controlled environment with no temptations. Put that monk in a modern city with smartphones, junk food, and social obligations, and watch what happens. Real discipline isn't about removing all challenges. It's about building systems that work in the real world. This is why extreme approaches fail. The person who goes on a super restrictive diet, the person who quits social media cold turkey, the person who tries to wake up at 4 a.m. after years of waking up at 8. They're trying to use willpower to fight their environment instead of designing an environment that supports the behavior. So here's the reframe. Discipline isn't about being tough. It's about being smart. It's not about forcing yourself to do hard things. It's about making hard things easier. It's not about winning battles with yourself. It's about designing a life where those battles don't happen. If you're constantly struggling, you don't need more discipline. You need a better system. And that's what truly disciplined people understand. They've stopped fighting themselves and started architecting their lives. They've made the right choice, the default choice. And when the right choice is the default, discipline becomes almost effortless. Not because it's easy, but because it's inevitable. The motivation paradox. Let me tell you about the biggest misconception in personal development. The idea that motivation creates action. We think the sequence goes like this. First, you feel motivated. Then, you take action. Then, you get results. Feel, do, achieve. This is backwards. The actual sequence is, you take action. You see results. You feel motivated. Do, achieve, feel. Motivation is not a cause, it's a consequence. And understanding this changes everything. Think about the last time you felt genuinely motivated to do something. Not excited about the idea of it. Actually motivated, energized, driven, pulled toward the behavior. I'm willing to bet it was something you'd already experienced success with. You felt motivated to play a game you're good at, to cook a dish you know how to make, to talk about a topic you understand, to work on a project you've made progress on. You didn't feel motivated to do something completely new that you've never done before. You might have felt curious, interested, excited about the possibility, but motivation, that deep, visceral pull, only comes after experience, after you've done the thing and gotten a reward from it. This is rooted in basic neuroscience. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It's what makes you want things, and your brain releases dopamine based on predicted reward. If you've never experienced a reward from a behavior, your brain has no basis for prediction, so it doesn't release much dopamine, so you don't feel motivated. But once you experience the reward, the runner's high, the satisfaction of completing a project, the good feeling of eating healthy, your brain updates its prediction model. Next time you consider that behavior, your brain says, "Oh, I remember this. This might lead to reward," and it releases dopamine, and you feel motivated. So waiting to feel motivated before you start is like waiting to feel wealthy before you save money. It's a chicken and egg problem that prevents you from ever starting. The solution? Action before motivation. Start before you feel ready. Do the thing in the smallest possible way, just to generate the experience, just to give your brain data. This is why the 2-minute rule is so powerful. Not, I'm going to work out for an hour. That's intimidating. Your brain has no prediction of reward for that if you haven't done it before. Instead, I'm going to put on gym clothes. That's 2 minutes. That's achievable. That generates momentum. And often, not always, but often, once you've put on gym clothes, you think, well, I might as well do something. You've tricked yourself into starting. And starting is the hardest part. Here's the physics principle again. Objects in motion stay in motion. Newton's first law applies to human behavior. The resistance is highest at the beginning. Once you're moving, continuing is easier. This is why writers say, write one bad sentence, not write for 2 hours. Just one sentence, because that one sentence breaks the inertia. Now, here's where this gets psychologically interesting. We experience something called the progress principle. Research by Teresa Amabile at Harvard showed that the single biggest motivator at work isn't money, recognition, or even passion for the work itself. It's progress, small wins, forward movement, evidence that you're making headway. When you feel like you're making progress, your motivation increases. When you feel stuck, your motivation plummets. So the key to sustained motivation isn't to wait for a big burst of inspiration. It's to create small, frequent wins that generate the feeling of progress. You don't need to run 5 miles. You need to run 1 mile and feel successful. You don't need to write a book. You need to write a page and feel productive. You don't need to master a skill. You need to get slightly better and notice the improvement. That's what fuels motivation, not the distant goal, the immediate progress. Here's the dark side of this. We've created a culture that worships big goals and dramatic transformations, before and after photos, zero to hero stories, complete life overhauls. And these stories are inspiring, but they're also demotivating, because they make it seem like anything less than massive change is failure. So people set huge goals, take massive action for a few days, see that they're nowhere near the goal, feel like they're failing, lose motivation, and quit. The goal was too far away to generate the feeling of progress. They needed smaller targets, closer wins, more frequent evidence of success. This is why habit tracking works, not because checking a box is inherently meaningful, but because it creates visible progress. You can see the chain of X's. You can see that you've done the thing 5 days in a row. That's progress. That's motivating. But here's the twist. Eventually, external progress isn't enough. Eventually, you need intrinsic motivation. You need to actually enjoy the process, not just the results. And that happens through a psychological shift called identity integration. When the behavior becomes part of who you are, not just something you do, motivation becomes automatic. The person who identifies as a runner doesn't need to motivate themselves to run. Running is just what they do. It's part of their identity. The person who identifies as a reader doesn't need to motivate themselves to read. That's just who they are. So the full sequence is actually take action arrow, experience reward arrow, feel motivated arrow, repeat action arrow, build identity arrow, automatic motivation. The beginning requires forcing action without motivation. The middle is fueled by results-based motivation. The end is sustained by identity-based motivation. But you can't skip to the end. You have to start at the beginning. Without feeling ready, without feeling motivated, without feeling inspired, you just start. And motivation follows. Not immediately, not always on the second or third try, but eventually. If you keep showing up, your brain will update its prediction model. It will start releasing dopamine in anticipation. It will start pulling you toward the behavior instead of requiring you to push yourself, but only if you start first. So if you're waiting to feel motivated, stop waiting. Do the smallest possible version of the thing, right now, today. Not because you feel like it, because you're teaching your brain to feel like it. You're training motivation. And that's the paradox. You create motivation by acting without it. The identity paradox. Now we get to the deepest paradox of all, the identity paradox. Here it is. To change your behavior, you must change who you are. But you must also stay yourself. You must become someone new while remaining you. That sounds like a contradiction, and it is. But it's also the key to everything. Let me explain through a thought experiment. There's an ancient philosophical puzzle called the ship of Theseus. Theseus has a ship. Over time, pieces of the ship need to be replaced. A plank rots, so he replaces it. A sail tears, so he replaces it. Eventually, every single piece of the original ship has been replaced. The question, is it still the same ship? Now take it further. Someone collected all the old pieces and rebuilt the original ship. Now there are 2 ships. Which one is the ship of Theseus? This isn't just philosophy. This is your life. You are constantly changing. The cells in your body are replaced. Your beliefs evolve. Your preferences shift. Your habits come and go. So who are you? Are you the sum of your current habits? Are you your history? Are you your potential? Are you your choices? This matters because habits are deeply connected to identity. And most people approach this connection completely wrong. They try to change behavior while keeping their identity fixed. I'm not a morning person, but I'm trying to wake up early. I'm not good at exercise, but I'm trying to work out. I'm bad with money, but I'm trying to save. Do you see the problem? You're fighting yourself. Half of you is trying to change. The other half is holding on to an identity that contradicts that change. And identity always wins. Because your brain seeks consistency between who you think you are and what you do. This is called cognitive dissonance, and your brain hates it. When your actions contradict your identity, something has to give. Usually, it's the actions, because identity feels more fundamental than behavior. So here's what happens. Someone who identifies as not a morning person sets an alarm for 5 a.m. They wake up tired, miserable, fighting their own sense of self. They're not thinking, I'm becoming a morning person. They're thinking, I'm forcing myself to do something I'm not. That's exhausting and unsustainable. Within a few days or weeks, they're back to sleeping in. And they think, see, I told you, I'm not a morning person. The identity wins. But here's the twist. The identity was never fixed in the first place. I'm not a morning person is not a genetic fact. It's a story you've been telling yourself. And stories can change. So the solution isn't to change behavior despite your identity. It's to change your identity through behavior. Small actions cast votes for the person you're becoming. Every time you wake up early, you're casting a vote for, I'm a morning person. Every time you exercise, you're casting a vote for, I'm someone who moves their body. Every time you write, you're casting a vote for, I'm a writer. You don't need to win every vote, you just need to win the majority. This is identity-based habit formation. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, you focus on who you want to become. Not, I want to lose weight, but I want to become someone who takes care of their body. Not, I want to write a book, but I want to become a writer. Not, I want to save money, but I want to become financially responsible. The shift is subtle but profound, because now every action is evidence of identity. You're not forcing yourself to do something that conflicts with who you are. You're proving to yourself who you are through what you do. Here's where the research gets fascinating. Studies on smoking cessation show that people who quit by saying, I'm trying to quit, have a significantly lower success rate than people who say, I'm not a smoker. Same behavior, not smoking. Different identity. The people who changed their identity changed their behavior permanently. The people who kept the smoker identity but tried to change the behavior, they relapsed at much higher rates, because they still saw themselves as smokers, just smokers who weren't currently smoking. And at some point, the dissonance became too much. The identity pulled them back. But the people who said, I'm not a smoker, that's identity level change. When offered a cigarette, they're not resisting temptation. They're declining something that doesn't align with who they are. It's not willpower, it's identity integrity. Now here's the paradox within the paradox. If you cling too tightly to any identity, you become rigid. I'm not a morning person is limiting if you want to wake up early. But I'm a morning person can also be limiting if you're forcing yourself to wake up early when your life circumstances change and that no longer serves you. Identity can be a cage just as much as it can be a compass. So the real skill is identity flexibility. Holding your identity loosely enough to evolve, but firmly enough to guide behavior. This is what actors do, method actors specifically. They temporarily adopt a different identity. They think, feel, and behave as that character, and it changes them. They report that playing certain roles changes who they are in real life, because behavior shapes identity, and identity shapes behavior. It's a loop, so you can use this intentionally. You can try on identities, experiment with them, see how they feel. What would I do if I were the kind of person who... Fill in that blank with whatever you're trying to become. What would I do if I were the kind of person who values their health? What would I do if I were the kind of person who finishes what they start? What would I do if I were the kind of person who speaks up for themselves? And then you do that thing. Not as a fake performance, as an experiment in becoming. You're not pretending. You're practicing. And over time, the practice becomes the identity. This is how all transformation happens. You don't become confident and then act confidently. You act confidently, and that builds confidence. You don't become brave and then do brave things. You do brave things, and that builds bravery. You don't become disciplined and then act disciplined. You act disciplined, and that builds discipline. The identity follows the evidence, so the identity paradox resolves like this. You are both fixed and fluid. You have a core self that remains consistent, but you also have the capacity to evolve. Your job isn't to find yourself as if there's a fixed, true self waiting to be discovered. Your job is to create yourself through your choices. Every habit is a vote for who you're becoming. Make sure you're voting for someone you want to be, not someone you think you should be, not someone who will impress others, not someone who fits a societal mold, someone who feels aligned with your deepest values, because that's the only identity that will stick. The consistency paradox. Here's a statement that's going to sound contradictory. Being consistent means knowing when to break consistency. This is the consistency paradox, and it's one of the most misunderstood principles in habit formation. We've all heard the advice, never miss twice. It's good advice. James Clear popularized it. If you miss one day, make sure you don't miss 2 days in a row. One miss is an accident. 2 misses is the beginning of a new pattern. But here's what that advice doesn't tell you. Sometimes you should miss. Sometimes breaking consistency is the most consistent thing you can do. Let me explain. If you've spent any time in the fitness world, you've heard of deload weeks. Athletes don't train at maximum intensity every single week. That's a recipe for burnout and injury. Instead, every 4th or 5th week, they intentionally reduce the intensity. They take a deload week. They're still training, still showing up, but at maybe 60% of their normal volume. This isn't weakness. This is strategy. The body needs recovery to adapt. If you push constantly, you don't get stronger. You break down. The same principle applies to habits. If you pursue 100% consistency forever, you're going to break. Because life isn't consistent. Life is variable. You get sick. You travel. You have a family emergency. You have a deadline. You have a bad week. And if your system demands perfection, those variables destroy the system. So you need to build variability into the system. Planned inconsistency. This might mean 1 day a week, you don't track your food. You just eat intuitively. 1 month a year, you take a break from your side project. 1 day a week, you sleep in instead of doing your morning routine. This isn't laziness. This is sustainability. Because the alternative is rigid adherence until you snap. And when you snap, you don't just miss 1 day, you quit entirely. I missed my workout twice this week, so I've already ruined it. Might as well stop. That's the all-or-nothing trap. The consistency paradox says, aim for 85%, not 100%. Research and performance science backs this up. The 85% rule. You learn fastest when you're succeeding about 85% of the time, not 100%, not 50%, 85%. Because 100% means it's too easy, you're not being challenged, and 50% means it's too hard. You're overwhelmed and discouraged. But 85%? That's the sweet spot. You're succeeding enough to stay motivated, but failing enough to stay engaged. So if you do your habit 6 days out of 7, that's 85%. That's perfect. If you do it 25 days out of 30, that's 83%. Still excellent. You're hitting the zone where growth happens. Now here's the controversial part. Sometimes quitting is the right choice. We're told winners never quit. We're told persistence is everything. We're told to push through. But that's not always true. Sometimes the habit you're trying to build isn't right for you. Sometimes the goal you're pursuing isn't aligned with your values. Sometimes you've learned enough to know this isn't your path. And continuing anyway, just to avoid the shame of quitting, is not consistency. It's stubbornness. The sunk cost fallacy applies to habits too. I've already invested 3 months in this morning routine. I can't stop now. Yes, you can. If it's not working, if it's making you miserable, if it's not serving you. The time you've invested doesn't obligate you to continue. This is hard to accept in a culture that glorifies relentless consistency. But part of being consistent is being consistent with your values. And if a habit is no longer aligned with your values, the consistent thing to do is stop. The question is, how do you know the difference? How do you know when to push through and when to quit? Here's my framework. Ask yourself, is this hard because it's new, or is this hard because it's wrong? New things are always hard. They're uncomfortable. They feel foreign. Your brain resists them because they're unfamiliar. That discomfort is growth. Push through it. But if something feels wrong, not just hard, but misaligned, that's different. If every cell in your body is saying, "This isn't me," that's worth listening to. If the habit is creating more problems than it solves, that's worth examining. If you're doing it for external validation rather than internal alignment, that's a red flag. So the consistency paradox is this. Be consistent with your system, but flexible with your tactics. Be consistent with your values, but flexible with your methods. Be consistent with showing up, but flexible with what showing up looks like. Some days, your workout is an hour at the gym. Some days, your workout is a 10-minute walk around the block. Both count. Both are consistent with, I'm someone who moves their body. The specific behavior can vary. The identity remains consistent. This is how you sustain habits for decades instead of weeks. You stop demanding perfection. You start embracing good enough. You stop white-knuckling. You start flowing. You stop being rigid. You start being resilient. Because consistency isn't about being a robot. It's about being reliably yourself, even when circumstances change. The control paradox. Here's the final paradox of this section, and it might be the most important. The more you try to control, the less control you have. This is the control paradox, and it's everywhere in habit formation. Think back to the pink elephant. The more you try not to think about it, the more you think about it. The more you try to control your thoughts, the less control you have. This extends to behavior. The more rigidly you try to control your eating, the more likely you are to binge. The more obsessively you track every detail, the more anxious you become about deviating. The more you force yourself to feel motivated, the more resistance you create. Control creates tension, and tension creates breakdown. This is the central insight of acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. Instead of controlling or eliminating uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, you accept them and commit to action anyway. You don't try to control the anxiety. You feel the anxiety and do the thing anyway. You don't try to eliminate the craving. You notice the craving and let it pass without acting on it. This is called urge surfing. When you get an urge to check your phone, to eat something you're trying to avoid, to skip your habit, you don't fight it. You observe it. Like a wave rising and falling, urges peak and then dissipate. Usually within 10 to 15 minutes. If you try to suppress the urge, it strengthens. If you try to control it, it controls you. But if you simply watch it, acknowledge it, and let it pass, it loses power. I'm noticing the urge to check my phone right now. That's interesting. I'm going to let that be there and continue with what I'm doing. You're not fighting. You're flowing. This is a Zen concept. Wu Wei. Effortless action, not forcing, not controlling, just moving with natural momentum. This applies to habit tracking too. Tracking can be incredibly powerful. Seeing your streak build, seeing your progress accumulate. But it can also become obsessive. You start tracking everything, optimizing everything, controlling everything, and suddenly you're anxious if you miss a day. You're stressed if the number isn't perfect. You're trapped by your own system. This is when tracking becomes counterproductive. You've crossed the line from helpful data to neurotic compulsion. So the question becomes, how do you maintain structure without becoming rigid? How do you track without becoming obsessed? How do you pursue excellence without becoming perfectionistic? The answer is looseness within structure. You have the structure, the system, the routine, the habit. But within that structure, you stay loose. You don't grip tightly, you hold lightly. You have preferences, not rules. You have guidelines, not laws. You aim for excellence, not perfection. This is the difference between healthy high achievers and burnout cases. The healthy ones have strong systems, but mental flexibility. The burnout cases have strong systems and mental rigidity. Here's a personal confession. I've been on both sides of this. I've had periods where I tracked every calorie, every workout, every productive hour, every dollar spent. And it worked. For a while. The control felt good. Until it didn't. Until the system became a prison. Until deviating from the system created anxiety. Until the tracking was taking more energy than the habits themselves. That's when I learned, some control is good, too much control is suffocating. So now I track selectively. I have systems, but I hold them loosely. If I miss a day, I notice it. I get curious about why, but I don't spiral into shame. If I deviate from the plan, I observe it, I learn from it, but I don't panic. The habits are there to serve me, not the other way around. This is the wisdom of letting go, not letting go of the habit, letting go of the need to control every aspect of the habit. Trusting the process, trusting yourself. This is especially important for people with anxiety or OCD tendencies. The urge to control is often an attempt to manage anxiety. If I can just control this, I'll feel safe. But it doesn't work. Because you can never control enough. There's always more to optimize, more to track, more to perfect. And the anxiety remains. What actually works is accepting the uncertainty. Accepting that you can't control everything. Building habits not to create certainty, but to create stability within uncertainty. That's the control paradox. The less you try to control, the more effective control you actually have. Because you're working with your brain, not against it. You're flowing with life, not forcing it. You're building sustainable change, not temporary compliance. So as we move into the next section, the underground mechanics of how this actually works, keep this in mind. We're not building a prison of perfect habits. We're building a life that flows naturally toward what matters. Structure with flexibility, systems with soul, habits with humanity. That's the goal. Act 3. The underground mechanics. The archaeology of self. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to dig. Like archaeologists excavating ancient ruins, we're going to unearth the hidden layers of your current life. Because here's what most people get wrong. They try to build new habits on top of old patterns without ever examining what's already there. They're building on unstable ground. So before we talk about building anything new, we need to understand what you're already doing. Most of your habits are invisible to you. You've automated them so thoroughly that you don't even notice them anymore. And you can't change what you can't see. So let's make the invisible visible. I want you to think about your morning. From the moment you wake up until you leave your house or start your work. Actually map it out in your mind. What's the very first thing you do when you wake up? And I mean the very first thing. Do you check your phone? Do you hit snooze? Do you immediately get out of bed? Do you lie there thinking? That's habit number 1. Then what? Do you go to the bathroom, make coffee, brush your teeth, check social media? In what order? Most people can't answer this accurately without actually observing themselves for a few days, because it's automatic. This is the Russian doll effect. Habits, inside habits, inside habits. Your morning routine isn't one habit. It's dozens of micro-habits nested together. The way you hold your toothbrush, which shoe you put on first, whether you check email before or after breakfast, the route you take to the coffee maker. All habits, all invisible, all shaping your day before you've made a single conscious decision. Now let's go deeper. What are your stress habits? When something goes wrong at work, what's your automatic response? Do you immediately reach for your phone? Do you eat something? Do you vent to someone? Do you go silent and withdraw? You probably have a pattern. You might not know what it is, but it's there. What are your transition habits? When you get home from work, what's the first thing you do? When you finish a task, what do you do next? When you're waiting, in line, in traffic, for a meeting to start, where does your attention go? These transitions are habit gold mines, because transitions are when your brain is most likely to default to automated behavior. You're between contexts, so your conscious mind isn't engaged yet, and your basal ganglia just runs whatever program is associated with that transition. For most people, that program is check phone. But it could be anything, and it's worth knowing what yours is. Now let's talk about social habits. How do you behave in groups? Are you the one who speaks first? The one who waits to speak? The one who makes jokes? The one who mediates conflict? That's habitual. You developed that pattern early, probably in childhood, and you've been running it ever since. When someone criticizes you, what's your automatic response? Do you defend yourself, shut down, counterattack, laugh it off, apologize immediately? That's a habit. When someone praises you, what happens? Do you deflect, accept graciously, feel uncomfortable, immediately downplay it? That's a habit too. These social habits are often the most invisible because we think of them as personality. I'm just shy. I'm just outgoing. I'm just sarcastic. But personality is largely habitual behavior patterns that have become so consistent, we mistake them for fixed traits. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The keystone habit. A keystone habit is a habit that, when you change it, triggers a cascade of other changes. It's not just one habit. It's the support beam holding up multiple other habits. For many people, exercise is a keystone habit. When they start exercising regularly, they automatically start eating better. They sleep better. They have more energy. They're more productive. They feel more confident. They didn't try to change all those things. Changing one thing changed everything. For others, it's sleep. When they prioritize sleep, their mood improves, their decision-making improves, their willpower improves, their health improves. For some, it's making their bed every morning. Sounds trivial, right? But Admiral William McRaven gave a famous commencement speech about this. He said, "If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another." It's a keystone habit because it sets the tone. It creates momentum. It signals, I'm the kind of person who does things right. Family dinners are a keystone habit for many households. Research shows that families who eat together regularly have kids with better grades, better mental health, lower rates of substance abuse, better communication skills. Not because eating together causes all those things directly, but because eating together creates a space for connection, communication, routine, and values transmission. It's the hub that supports everything else. Financial tracking is a keystone habit for wealth building. People who track their spending don't just become more aware of their money. They start making better financial decisions across the board. They question purchases. They look for deals. They think long-term. Again, changing one habit cascades into changing many. So here's your mission in this archaeology phase. Identify your keystone habit. Ask yourself, if I could only change one thing, what single habit would create the biggest ripple effect in my life? That's your keystone. And this is personal. It's different for everyone. For someone struggling with depression, it might be getting sunlight first thing in the morning. For someone overwhelmed by information, it might be a media fast one day a week. For someone disconnected from their body, it might be a daily walk. For someone whose life feels chaotic, it might be a consistent bedtime. You have to excavate your own life to find it. Here's how. For the next 3 days, become an observer of yourself, not a judge, an observer. Notice your patterns without trying to change them yet. What do you do automatically? What do you do when stressed? What do you do when bored? What do you do in transitions? Write it down, map it out, and look for the patterns behind the patterns, the second-order effects. When you stay up late, what happens the next day? Not just, I'm tired. What else? Do you eat worse, skip exercise, have less patience, make poorer decisions? When you exercise, what else improves? Energy, mood, sleep, confidence, productivity. When you spend time on social media, what suffers? Focus, presence, creativity, relationships. These connections are your map. They show you which habits are load-bearing and which are cosmetic, which habits are keystones and which are decorative. And once you know that, you know where to focus. Because here's the secret. You don't need to change everything. You need to change the right thing, the thing that holds everything else up. Change that, and everything else starts to shift. This is why some people can make dramatic life changes seemingly overnight, while others struggle for years with minimal progress. The successful ones found their keystone. They didn't try to overhaul their entire life. They pulled one specific lever that moved everything else. So, dig deep. Do the archaeology. Find what's really there beneath the surface. Because you can't build a cathedral on quicksand. You need solid ground. And solid ground comes from understanding what you're actually working with, not what you wish you were working with. What's actually there? Environmental architecture. Now we come to one of the most powerful and most underrated aspects of habit formation, your environment. I'm going to make a provocative claim that's going to make some people uncomfortable. Free will is mostly an illusion. Stay with me. I don't mean you have zero agency. I don't mean your choices don't matter. I mean that your choices are heavily influenced, maybe even determined, by your environment. And most of that influence is happening beneath your conscious awareness. There's a famous study in social psychology, the Stanford Prison Experiment. In 1971, Philip Zimbardo took psychologically normal college students and randomly assigned them to play either guards or prisoners in a mock prison. The experiment had to be shut down after 6 days because the guards became genuinely abusive and the prisoners showed signs of extreme stress and breakdown. These were normal people, good people. They were randomly assigned to these roles. But the environment, the situation, transformed their behavior. Now that study has been criticized for methodology, and there's debate about the conclusions. But the fundamental insight remains true. Situations are more powerful than we think. Your environment is programming you right now. The question is, are you programming it intentionally, or are you letting it program you by default? Let's start with the physical environment. Light. You probably know that blue light from screens suppresses melatonin and disrupts sleep. But do you know that morning sunlight exposure within the first hour of waking helps set your circadian rhythm, improves mood, and increases alertness throughout the day? Do you know that warm, dim light in the evening signals to your brain that it's time to wind down? Most people are getting this backwards. Dim light in the morning, bright light at night, and then they wonder why they can't sleep and can't wake up. Your light environment is controlling your sleep-wake cycle more than your willpower is. Sound. Silence is increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. Your brain is constantly processing sound, even when you're not consciously aware of it. Background noise increases cognitive load. It makes everything slightly harder. Some people work better with music, some with brown noise or white noise. Some need silence. But most people never experiment. They just work in whatever sound environment happens to exist. That's leaving performance on the table. Scent. This is the most underutilized tool in habit formation. Olfactory anchoring. Your sense of smell is directly connected to the limbic system, the emotional, memory-forming part of your brain. This is why a smell can instantly transport you to a specific memory. You can use this. If you meditate with a specific essential oil, lavender, sandalwood, whatever, every time, your brain will start to associate that scent with the meditative state. Eventually, the scent alone will trigger the state. If you study with a specific scent and then use that scent during the exam, you'll recall the information better. This is called context-dependent memory, and it's powerful. Temperature. Cold exposure, cold showers, ice baths, triggers a stress response that, when practiced regularly, builds stress resilience. It also releases norepinephrine, which improves focus and mood. Heat exposure, saunas, hot baths, triggers heat shock proteins that have numerous health benefits and also signals relaxation to your nervous system. Most people are thermally comfortable all the time, and comfort is the enemy of adaptation. Strategic discomfort, in controlled doses, makes you more resilient. Spatial design. This is where most people have the most leverage. The way your space is organized determines what behaviors are easy and what behaviors are hard. If healthy food is at eye level in your fridge and junk food is in the back of a drawer, you'll eat healthier. Not because you have more discipline, because the environment is making the choice for you. If your running shoes are by your bed and your phone is charging in another room, you're more likely to exercise and less likely to scroll. If your guitar is on a stand in your living room versus in a case in your closet, you're exponentially more likely to play it. This is the principle of friction. Reduce friction for good habits. Increase friction for bad habits. Make the good choice the easy choice. Make the bad choice require effort. James Clear calls this choice architecture. You're not eliminating choices. You're designing the environment so that the default choice aligns with your goals. Here's a powerful example. In the Netherlands, they redesigned the bathroom in the Amsterdam airport. They etched a small image of a fly into each urinal. Just a tiny fly. Men, being men, aimed at the fly. Spillage outside the urinal decreased by 80%. They didn't tell people to aim better. They didn't put up signs. They didn't appeal to willpower. They just changed the environment, and behavior changed automatically. This works for everything. Want to read more? Put books in every room. On your nightstand, by your couch, in your bathroom. Make books more accessible than your TV remote. Want to eat healthier? Don't buy junk food. You can't eat what's not there. Want to focus better at work? Remove every distraction from your workspace. Phone in a drawer. Close unnecessary tabs. Clear your desk. Want to drink more water? Put a full water bottle on your desk. You'll drink it without thinking. Now let's talk about digital environment. This is where most people are getting destroyed. Your phone is the most manipulative environment you interact with every day. The order of apps on your home screen determines what you use. If social media is on your first page, you'll use it more. If your meditation app or reading app is on your first page, you'll use those more. Sounds obvious. But how many people intentionally design their home screen? Almost none. They just leave it however it was when they downloaded apps. That's like leaving your furniture wherever the movers happen to drop it and wondering why your house feels chaotic. Notifications are the enemy. Every notification is a cue. It triggers the habit loop. Cue, ding. Routine, check phone. Reward, novelty, information, social validation. Your phone is training you to be distracted. Turn off all notifications except the ones that are truly urgent. Not the ones that feel urgent, the ones that are actually urgent. For most people, that's phone calls and messages from specific people. Everything else can wait. App limits can help, but they're easy to override. What works better? Delete the app. If you need it, you can access it through the browser. But the friction of typing in the URL is often enough to break the automatic behavior. The infinite scroll is designed to prevent closure. There's no natural stopping point, so you just keep going. You can fight this with browser extensions that remove the feed, or you can just not use those platforms. I know that's extreme, but consider, what would you lose if you stopped scrolling social media? Really, what would you actually lose? For most people, the answer is nothing of value. But what would you gain? Hours, attention, presence, mental clarity, creativity. That's the trade. Now, the online world also includes your information diet. What you consume shapes what you think about. What you think about shapes what you do. If you're consuming outrage content, you'll be outraged. If you're consuming comparison content, you'll compare yourself. If you're consuming doom content, you'll feel doomed. Not because you're weak, because your brain absorbs what it's exposed to. So, curate ruthlessly. Unfollow accounts that make you feel worse. Follow accounts that make you think better. Subscribe to newsletters that teach you something. Unsubscribe from newsletters that just create anxiety. Your information environment is your mental diet. Most people wouldn't eat literal garbage, but they consume informational garbage all day and wonder why they feel terrible. Finally, let's talk about social environment. This is the most powerful environment of all, and the hardest to change, because your social environment is made of people, and people have feelings and opinions about your changes. But here's the truth. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's not just a motivational saying, that's research. The Framingham Heart Study tracked thousands of people over decades. They found that behaviors spread through social networks. If your friend becomes obese, your likelihood of becoming obese increases by 57%. If your friend's friend becomes obese, your likelihood increases by 20%, even if you've never met that person. 3 degrees of separation. Habits are contagious. This works for everything: happiness, depression, smoking, quitting smoking, exercise, laziness. The people around you are influencing your behavior constantly. Through mirror neurons, the neurons that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that action. Through social proof, the tendency to do what others are doing because it feels safe and normal. Through accountability, or lack thereof. If everyone around you is eating poorly, you'll eat poorly, because that's normal in that context. If everyone around you is constantly busy and stressed, you'll be busy and stressed. Because rest feels abnormal. If everyone around you is cynical and negative, you'll become cynical and negative because optimism feels naive. So what do? You can't always change who you're around. You have a family, you have coworkers, you have existing friendships, but you can be intentional about who you spend time with. You can seek out people who embody the habits you want to build. You can join communities, online or in person, where your desired behavior is normal. If you want to be a writer, spend time with writers, where writing every day is just what people do. If you want to be fit, spend time with fit people, where exercise is just part of life. If you want to be financially responsible, spend time with financially responsible people, where talking about money is normal. This isn't about abandoning your current relationships. It's about adding relationships that support who you're becoming. And sometimes, it does mean creating distance from relationships that are actively undermining you. If someone mocks you every time you try to improve, that's toxic. If someone pressures you to break your commitments, that's toxic. If someone only wants you to stay the same because your growth makes them uncomfortable, that's toxic. You don't owe anyone your stagnation. This is hard. This is uncomfortable. This is why most people don't change their social environment even when they know they should. But it's also the highest leverage point, because willpower can't overcome your social environment indefinitely. Eventually, you either change your environment or your environment changes you. So here's your action step for this chapter. Audit your environment across all dimensions: physical, light, sound, scent, temperature, spatial design; digital, phone layout, notifications, apps, information diet; social, who you spend time with, who influences you, who supports you; and ask, is this environment supporting who I want to become, or is it supporting who I've been? If it's the latter, you know what needs to change, not your willpower, your environment. The 2-minute rule. Now we're going to talk about one of the simplest and most effective techniques in habit formation, the 2-minute rule. And I'm going to tell you why it works, why most people get it wrong, and how to use it properly. The rule is simple. When you're building a new habit, scale it down to something that takes 2 minutes or less. Want to start exercising? Your habit is, put on your gym clothes. That's it. That's the habit. Want to start meditating? Your habit is, Sit on your meditation cushion. Want to start reading? Your habit is read one page. Want to start writing? Your habit is write one sentence. This sounds ridiculous. It sounds too easy. And that's exactly the point. Most people fail to build habits not because they lack discipline, but because they start too big. They try to go from zero to hero immediately. I'm going to work out for an hour every day. I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes every morning. I'm going to write 2,000 words a day. Those aren't habits, those are aspirations. And aspirations feel overwhelming. So what happens? You don't start. Or you start and quit within a week. The 2-minute rule solves this by destroying the activation energy. Activation energy is the initial push needed to start a behavior. In chemistry, it's the energy needed to start a reaction. In habit formation, it's the psychological resistance you feel before starting, and that resistance is usually highest at the very beginning. Once you start, continuing is easier. This is Newton's first law again. Objects in motion stay in motion. The hardest part is initiating motion. So the 2-minute rule makes initiation absurdly easy. Put on gym clothes? That's nothing. You can do that even when you're exhausted. And here's what actually happens. Most of the time, once you put on your gym clothes, you do more. You don't just put them on and take them off. You do some stretches, maybe some push-ups. Maybe you actually work out. Not because you planned to, because the momentum carried you forward. But even if you don't, even if you literally just put on gym clothes and that's all, you've still succeeded. You kept your commitment. You cast a vote for your identity. You maintained the streak. And that matters more than the quantity of work done. Because habits are about consistency, not intensity. You're building the neural pathway. You're reinforcing the cue routine reward loop. And 2 minutes is enough to do that. Here's the neuroscience. Your brain doesn't care how long you do something, it cares that you did it. The habit is the showing up, not the duration. Once showing up becomes automatic, you can scale the behavior. But if you skip the foundation and try to go straight to intensity, you're building on nothing. This is why New Year's resolutions fail. January 1st, I'm going to transform my life. January 3rd, this is too hard, I give up. They tried to make massive changes with zero foundation. The 2-minute rule builds the foundation first. It's a gateway habit. You're not trying to run a marathon. You're trying to become a runner. And you become a runner by running. Even if it's just around the block. You become a writer by writing. Even if it's just one sentence. You become a meditator by meditating. Even if it's just one breath, the identity forms through repetition, not duration. Now, here's where people get this wrong. They use the 2-minute rule as a permanent ceiling instead of a temporary floor. The point isn't to only ever do 2 minutes forever. The point is to make 2 minutes your minimum viable commitment. On bad days, you do 2 minutes and celebrate it. On good days, you do more and celebrate that too, but you never do less than 2 minutes. This creates a baseline, a floor you never fall below, and that's what builds consistency. Over time, 2 minutes becomes automatic. Then you can scale. Your habit becomes, put on gym clothes and do 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. But each step is sustainable because you're building on solid ground. Here's the other mistake people make. They pick the wrong 2 minutes. The 2-minute version of your habit should be the first 2 minutes of the behavior, not a random 2 minutes. Not think about working out for 2 minutes. The actual first step. Put on gym clothes, because that's literally the first thing you do when you work out. Sit on your meditation cushion, because that's literally the first thing you do when you meditate. Open your writing document, because that's literally the first thing you do when you write. This is strategic, because the first step is the hardest, and it's the most important. Once you've taken the first step, the second step is easier. So you're not trying to build the whole habit, you're trying to build the initiation habit. And that's a game changer. Think about procrastination. Procrastination isn't about the task being hard, It's about starting being hard. Once you start, you usually keep going. The task itself isn't the problem. The problem is overcoming the initial resistance. So the 2-minute rule is an anti-procrastination tool. You don't have to write an essay. You just have to write one sentence. And usually, once you write one sentence, you write another. And another. But even if you don't, even if you write one sentence and stop, you've broken the procrastination pattern. You've proven that starting is possible. And next time, starting will be slightly easier. This compounds. Every time you honor the 2-minute commitment, you're lowering the activation energy for next time. You're training your brain. This is easy, this is safe, this is doable, and eventually, the behavior becomes automatic. You don't think about it, you just do it. That's when you've successfully built the habit. So here's your assignment. Pick one habit you want to build, just one. Now ask, what's the 2-minute version of this? What's the absolute smallest first step? That's your habit for the next 30 days, not the full behavior, just the first 2 minutes. And watch what happens. You'll probably do more than 2 minutes most days, but on the days you don't, you'll still have succeeded. And success breeds success. That's the power of the 2-minute rule. Habit stacking. Now let's talk about one of the most elegant habit-building strategies ever devised. Habit stacking. The concept is beautifully simple. You take a habit you already do automatically and stack a new habit on top of it. The formula. After current habit, I will new habit. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write in my gratitude journal. After I sit down for lunch, I will text someone I appreciate. After I close my laptop for the day, I will do 10 push-ups. After I get into bed, I will read for 10 minutes. Why does this work? Because you're leveraging existing neural pathways. Remember, your brain has already automated the current habit. It happens without conscious thought. So you're using that automation as a cue for the new behavior. You're piggybacking on established momentum. The current habit is the trigger, the cue in the habit loop. And because that cue is reliable, it happens every day automatically. Your new habit has a reliable trigger. You don't have to remember to do it. The existing habit reminds you. This is massively more effective than vague commitments like, I'll meditate more, or I'll exercise regularly. Those have no trigger, no specific time or place, so you have to remember and rely on motivation, and both of those are unreliable. But after I brush my teeth at night, I will do 2 minutes of stretching. That's specific triggered, automatic. You brush your teeth every night anyway. It's already in your routine, so you're just adding one more thing to an existing sequence. This is how you build routines. You don't create a routine from scratch. You stack habits onto what's already there. Let me give you examples of powerful stacks. Morning stack. After I wake up, I will drink a glass of water. After I drink water, I will make my bed. After I make my bed, I will do 5 minutes of stretching. After I stretch, I will meditate for 2 minutes. After I meditate, I will write 3 things I'm grateful for. That's 5 habits, stacked, taking maybe 15 minutes total. But none of them require decision-making. They just flow. One triggers the next, triggers the next. Work shutdown stack. After I finish my last task, I will close all browser tabs. After I close my tabs, I will write tomorrow's priorities. After I write priorities, I will shut down my computer. After I shut down, I will take a 5-minute walk. This creates a clean transition from work to personal time. And again, no decisions, just a sequence. Evening stack. After I finish dinner, I will put my phone in another room. After I put my phone away, I will read for 20 minutes. After I read, I will prepare my clothes for tomorrow. After I prepare clothes, I will do my skincare routine. You can stack anything onto anything. The key is making sure the current habit is truly automatic. If the trigger habit isn't reliable, the stack won't work. So don't stack onto habits you're trying to build. Stack onto habits you already have. And start with one stack. One new habit attached to one existing habit. Get that solid. Then add another. Over time, you'll have multiple stacks throughout your day, and your entire routine becomes a series of automatic sequences. This is how high performers operate. They don't make hundreds of decisions throughout the day. They've automated most of their day into stacks, so their willpower and decision-making capacity is available for what actually matters. For the creative work, the strategic thinking, the important decisions, everything else just flows. That's the power of habit stacking. Neurochemical hacking. Now we're going into the chemistry, because everything we've talked about, habits, motivation, willpower, identity, all of it is ultimately neurochemical. Your brain runs on chemicals, and if you understand which chemicals do what, you can design habits that optimize your neurochemistry. This isn't about biohacking supplements or nootropics. This is about understanding the natural chemicals your brain produces and learning to trigger them through behavior. There are 4 primary chemicals that drive human behavior: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins. Let's break them down. Dopamine. This is the most misunderstood chemical in popular psychology. Everyone calls it the pleasure chemical or the happiness chemical. It's not, it's the seeking chemical, the anticipation chemical, the motivation chemical. Dopamine is released when you're pursuing something, not when you get it. This is why the chase feels better than the catch. Why scrolling for the next interesting post is addictive, but you feel empty after an hour of scrolling. Why shopping feels great, but the item sitting in your closet doesn't. Dopamine is about the hunt, not the prize. And this is crucial for habit formation, because if you can make the process dopamine rich, you'll be naturally motivated to repeat it. So how do you trigger dopamine through habits? Progress. Visible progress triggers dopamine. This is why habit tracking works. Checking off a box gives you a dopamine hit. This is why video games are addictive. Every level up, every achievement, every reward, dopamine. You can gamify your habits. Give yourself points, track streaks, create visual progress markers. Your brain doesn't care that you made up the game. It still releases dopamine when you score. Variable rewards also trigger dopamine. This is the slot machine effect. When you don't know if you'll get a reward, but you might, dopamine spikes higher than when the reward is guaranteed. This is why social media is so addictive. You don't know if the next refresh will have something interesting, but it might. You can use this ethically. If you're trying to build a reading habit, don't read the same genre every time. Mix it up. Create unpredictability. If you're trying to build a workout habit, vary the exercises. Your brain likes novelty, but here's the warning. Dopamine hacking can become addiction, because the same mechanisms that make habits stick are the mechanisms that make drugs addictive. Cocaine floods your brain with dopamine. So does scrolling TikTok. Obviously different magnitudes, but same mechanism. So you need to be intentional about what you're conditioning yourself to crave. Are you chasing novelty for its own sake? Or are you using novelty to sustain meaningful behaviors? That's the ethical line. Serotonin. This is the status and respect chemical. Serotonin is released when you feel significant, valued, respected by others. This is why public recognition is so powerful, why awards matter, why social validation feels good, and this is why social habits are so sticky. When your habit makes you feel respected or admired, serotonin reinforces it. This is why fitness influencers post their workouts. The social recognition triggers serotonin, which reinforces the behavior. You can use this. Share your progress, not to brag, but to create accountability and recognition. Join a community where your habit is valued. If you're writing, join a writing group. When people read your work and respond, serotonin. If you're learning a skill, share your progress. When people acknowledge your growth, serotonin. But there's a shadow side to this too. Serotonin is hierarchical. It's about status. And status is relative, which means comparison. This is why social media can be toxic. You're constantly comparing your status to others. And if you're lower in the hierarchy, serotonin drops. you feel worse. So the key is finding communities where you're respected, but not in zero-sum competition, where everyone's growth is celebrated, not just the top performers. That's healthy serotonin. Not toxic comparison. Oxytocin. This is the bonding chemical. The connection chemical oxytocin is released during physical touch, during eye contact, during meaningful conversation, during acts of kindness. It's what makes you feel close to people, and it's incredibly powerful for habit formation when you build social habits. Want to maintain a friendship habit? Hug when you greet. Physical touch triggers oxytocin. Want to strengthen family bonds? Have device-free dinners with real conversation connection triggers oxytocin. Oxytocin also reduces stress and anxiety. It's the antidote to cortisol. So habits that involve connection are not just good for relationships. They're good for your nervous system. This is why isolation is so harmful. You're not getting oxytocin, and why the loneliness epidemic is actually a neurochemical crisis. People aren't just sad because they're alone. Their brains are literally lacking the chemical that creates well-being. So if you're building habits in isolation, you're missing a powerful reinforcer. Find ways to make your habits social workout with a friend, study with a partner, create with a community. The oxytocin will make the habit feel better, which makes it more likely to stick. Endorphins. These are the pain-masking chemicals. Endorphins are released during intense physical activity, during laughter, during certain foods. They're your brain's natural painkillers. This is the runner's high, the post-workout euphoria. And this is why exercise is such a powerful keystone habit. It literally makes you feel good through chemistry. But you have to push hard enough to trigger endorphins. A casual walk won't do it. You need intensity. You need to stress the system. That's uncomfortable. But that's also what creates the reward. This is why people become addicted to intense exercise. The endorphin hit is real. Laughter also triggers endorphins. This is why humor is so important. Why playfulness matters. If you can make your habits fun, if you can laugh while doing them, you're getting neurochemical reinforcement. Now here's how you put this all together. The most powerful habits trigger multiple chemicals. Exercise, endorphins from the workout, dopamine from tracking progress, serotonin from looking fit, oxytocin if done with others. That's a neurochemical jackpot. Creative work, dopamine from making progress, serotonin from recognition, oxytocin from sharing with others. Volunteering, oxytocin from helping, serotonin from being valued, dopamine from seeing impact. Social connection, oxytocin from bonding, serotonin from belonging, endorphins from laughter. Do you see the pattern? Habits that engage multiple neurochemical systems are the most reinforcing. So when you're designing your habits, ask, how can I build in progress markers? Dopamine. How can I build in social recognition? Serotonin. How can I build in connection? Oxytocin. How can I build in physical intensity or fun? Endorphins. You don't need all four, but the more you have, the stronger the habit. Now, the ethical consideration. You are manipulating yourself, and that's okay, as long as you're manipulating yourself toward your values. The problem is when you let others manipulate you toward their goals. Every app on your phone is using these same principles. They're triggering dopamine with notifications, serotonin with likes, oxytocin with messages, endorphins with entertaining content. They're hijacking your neurochemistry for their profit. So the question is, are you going to let them control your chemistry, or are you going to take control yourself? Design your habits to optimize your neurochemistry for your goals, not theirs. That's neurochemical sovereignty. The timeline secrets. Let's talk about time, specifically how long it actually takes to build a habit, because you've been lied to. The 21-day myth is everywhere. It takes 21 days to form a habit. We already debunked where this came from, a plastic surgeon's observation about facial adjustment, not habit research. But what does the actual research say? In 2009, Philippa Lally at University College London studied 96 people over 12 weeks. She asked them to choose one new habit, eating, drinking, or exercising, and tracked how long it took for the behavior to become automatic. The results? The range was 18 to 254 days, 18 to 254. That's a massive variance. The average was 66 days. So for a simple habit like drinking water after breakfast, you're looking at about 2 months before it feels automatic. For complex habits like exercising for 30 minutes, it can take 8 months or more. But here's what's crucial. The timeline varies based on the habit, the person, and the context. Simple habits automate faster. Complex habits take longer. Habits that align with your identity form faster. Habits that contradict your identity take longer. Habits with immediate rewards form faster. Habits with delayed rewards take longer. So the question, how long does it take to build a habit, doesn't have a single answer. But there are patterns, and understanding these patterns can save you from quitting right before the breakthrough. Here's the real timeline of habit formation. Days 1 to 7, the honeymoon phase. High motivation, high excitement, everything feels possible. You're running on the novelty of the new behavior. This is easy, and that's the trap. Because you think, this is sustainable. It's not. You're running on emotion, not system. The honeymoon phase always ends. Days 8 to 21, the valley of despair. This is where most people quit. The novelty has worn off. The behavior isn't automatic yet. It still requires effort, and you're not seeing major results yet. This is the gap between effort and reward. You're putting in energy, but the payoff isn't visible yet. This feels like failure. It's not. This is the most important phase. This is where the neural pathway is being carved. It's hard because it's working. If you can survive this phase, you're 70% of the way there. Days 22 to 45. Fragile automation. Something shifts here. The behavior starts to feel slightly easier, slightly more natural. You're not thinking about it as much, but it's still fragile. One disruption, travel, illness, a stressful week, and it can collapse. This is where you need to be protective of the habit. Don't let external circumstances break your streak during this phase. Use the never miss twice rule religiously. If you miss one day, get back to it immediately. Days 46 to 66 plus. True integration. Around the 2-month mark, for simple habits, something clicks. The behavior feels automatic. You do it without thinking. You feel weird when you don't do it. That's the sign. When not doing it feels stranger than doing it. At this point, the habit is integrated. It's part of your identity, your routine, your life. But here's what nobody tells you. Habits can still break even after they're established. If you completely change your environment, move to a new city, start a new job, have a major life change, the cues that triggered your habit might disappear, and the habit might disappear with them. This is why New Year's resolutions feel easier than random Tuesday resolutions. New Year is a fresh start, a psychological clean slate. But it's also why resolutions fail, because the environment hasn't actually changed. You're trying to run new software on old hardware. So the timeline secret is this. Expect the journey to be hard around week 2 or 3. That's not a sign you're failing. That's a sign you're in the critical phase. Push through. Expect fragility until at least day 45. Protect the habit during this time. Be vigilant. Expect true automation around day 66 for simple habits, longer for complex ones. And even after automation, expect to maintain the habit consciously during major life transitions. Habits are resilient, but not invincible. Now, there's another timeline that matters, the ultradian rhythm. Your brain operates in roughly 90-minute cycles throughout the day. You have about 90 minutes of peak focus, then you need a break. This is called an ultradian cycle. And if you align your habits with these cycles, they're easier to maintain. Don't try to work for 3 hours straight. Work for 90 minutes. Break. Work for 90 minutes. Don't try to study for 4 hours straight. Study for 90 minutes. Break. Study for 90 minutes. Your brain isn't designed for marathon focus. It's designed for sprint cycles. So, respect the rhythm. Also, certain habits work better at certain times of day. Chronobiology, the study of biological rhythms, shows that your body has natural peaks and valleys. Most people have peak cognitive performance in the late morning. Around 10 a.m. to noon, that's when you should do your hardest mental work. Most people have a post-lunch dip, around 2 to 3 p.m. That's when you should do administrative tasks or take a nap, not try to focus intensely. Most people have a second wind in late afternoon, around 4 to 6 p.m. That's good for creative work or exercise. If you try to force a habit at the wrong time of day, you're fighting biology. If you align the habit with your natural rhythm, it flows. So the timeline secret isn't just about days to automation. It's about understanding the rhythms, daily, weekly, monthly, and working with them, not against them. Time is not linear in habit formation. Some days will feel easy, some will feel impossible. That's normal. What matters is staying in the game long enough for the curve to bend in your favor, because it will. Just not in 21 days. The ripple analysis. Before we move into the shadow work, the difficult, uncomfortable territory where real transformation happens, I want you to understand something. Everything is connected. Every habit has second-order effects, third-order effects, ripples that extend far beyond the behavior itself. When you start exercising, you don't just get fit, you sleep better, which means you have more energy, which means you're more productive, which means you accomplish more, which means you feel more confident, which affects your relationships, which affects your mood, which affects your decisions. One habit, a dozen effects. This is the ripple. And it works in reverse too. When you start doom scrolling before bed, you don't just waste time, you disrupt your sleep, which means you're tired tomorrow, which means you make worse food choices, which means your energy crashes, which means you skip your workout, which means you feel worse about yourself, which affects your confidence, which affects your relationships. One habit, a dozen consequences. Most people think about habits in isolation. I'll just start meditating. I'll just quit social media. I'll just start waking up early. But habits don't exist in isolation. They exist in a system, and changing one part of the system affects everything else. This is why keystone habits are so powerful. They don't just change one thing. They create cascading changes. But it's also why you need to be careful. Because negative habits cascade too. If you're struggling with multiple areas of your life, the temptation is to try to fix everything at once. Don't. Find the keystone. The one habit that, if changed, will create positive ripples everywhere else. That's your leverage point. Now, as we transition into the shadow work, I need to prepare you for something. What we've covered so far has been relatively comfortable strategies, techniques, science. What comes next is uncomfortable, because we're going to talk about why your bad habits exist in the first place, what function they're serving, what they're protecting you from. And that requires honesty, real honesty, the kind that makes you squirm. But that's where the power is, because you can't change a behavior if you don't understand why it exists. And most people don't. They just try to force themselves to stop, without ever asking why they're doing it in the first place. That's like trying to treat a fever without addressing the infection. You might suppress the symptom temporarily, but the underlying cause remains. So we're going deeper, into the psychology, the trauma, the fear, the avoidance, into the shadow. This is where habit formation becomes transformation. Are you ready? Act 4. The shadow work. The truth about bad habits. I'm going to say something that might make you uncomfortable. There are no bad habits, only misaligned ones. Stay with me. Every habit you have, every single one, even the destructive ones, is serving a function. Your brain doesn't create habits randomly. It creates them because they solve a problem. The question is, what problem is this habit solving? And is it solving it in a way that aligns with your long-term well-being, or in a way that creates more problems than it solves? That's the difference between a good habit and a bad habit. Not morality. Function. Let me give you examples. Procrastination. Everyone thinks procrastination is about laziness. It's not. Procrastination is about emotion regulation. When you procrastinate, you're avoiding the discomfort of starting a task. Maybe it's anxiety about not being good enough. Maybe it's fear of failure. Maybe it's fear of success and the responsibility that comes with it. Maybe it's decision fatigue. You don't want to make another decision. Whatever it is, procrastination is your brain's way of protecting you from that feeling. In the short term, it works. You feel relief. In the long term, it creates more anxiety. Deadlines pile up. Quality suffers. Stress increases. But your brain isn't thinking long term. It's thinking, right now, you're uncomfortable. Here's a way to feel less uncomfortable. That's the function. Overeating. People think overeating is about lack of willpower or discipline. Sometimes it's about hunger. But often it's not. Often it's about emotional regulation. Food, especially sugar, fat, and salt, triggers dopamine and endorphins. It literally makes you feel better. So when you're stressed, anxious, sad, lonely, bored, food becomes a coping mechanism. It's self-medication. In the short term, it works. You feel comforted. In the long term, it creates health problems, weight gain, guilt, shame. But your brain is solving the immediate problem. You're feeling bad. Here's something that makes you feel good. That's the function. Phone scrolling. You know it's wasting time. You know it's making you feel worse. You know you should stop. But you keep doing it. Why? Because it's solving something. Maybe it's reducing boredom. Your brain craves stimulation, and scrolling provides novelty. Maybe it's avoiding difficult emotions. When you're anxious or sad, scrolling numbs you. Maybe it's avoiding difficult tasks. When you have work to do that feels overwhelming, scrolling provides escape. Maybe it's avoiding loneliness. Scrolling creates a pseudo sense of connection. In the short term, it works. You feel less bored, less anxious, less lonely. In the long term, it robs you of time, attention, presence, real connection. But your brain is solving the immediate problem. That's the function. Do you see the pattern? Every bad habit is an attempted solution to a real problem. The problem is real. The solution is just ineffective long-term. So the question isn't, how do I stop this bad habit? The question is, what is this habit trying to solve, and how can I solve it better? This is called functional analysis in behavioral psychology. You identify the function the behavior serves, and then you find an alternative behavior that serves the same function but without the negative consequences. This is why willpower doesn't work for breaking bad habits. Because you're trying to eliminate the solution without addressing the problem, and your brain will not let you do that. If you're stressed and food is your stress reliever, telling yourself, don't eat, doesn't eliminate the stress. It just eliminates your coping mechanism. So what happens? Eventually, the stress becomes unbearable, and you return to the behavior with even more intensity. This is the abstinence violation effect. You white-knuckle your way through avoiding the behavior, then you break, and when you break, you go all in. I've already eaten one cookie, might as well eat the whole box. I've already checked Instagram once, might as well scroll for an hour. All or nothing thinking. So the better approach, identify what need the habit is meeting. Then, find a healthier way to meet that need. Let's go through the common ones. If your habit is serving emotional regulation, what you need, a way to manage difficult emotions. Healthier alternatives, journaling to process emotions, movement to discharge stress, breathwork to regulate your nervous system, talking to someone, creative expression. If your habit is serving avoidance, what you need, a way to cope with anxiety about a task or situation. Healthier alternatives, breaking the task into smaller pieces, setting a timer for just 5 minutes of work, addressing the underlying fear, Therapy, coaching, honest conversation, reframing the task. If your habit is serving stimulation, novelty, what you need, engagement, challenge, interest. Healthier alternatives, learning something new, reading something interesting, having a real conversation, creating something, playing a game that actually requires thought. If your habit is serving connection, what you need, real human connection, not pseudo-connection. Healthier alternatives, calling a friend, spending time with someone in person, joining a community, volunteering. If your habit is serving control, what you need, a sense of agency in a chaotic world. Healthier alternatives, focusing on what you can control. Building systems that create stability, acceptance practices for what you can't control. Do you see how this works? You're not eliminating the need. You're meeting it differently. This is the only way to sustainably break a bad habit. Replace it with something that serves the same function. Now, let's talk about addiction. Because addiction is the most extreme version of this pattern. Whether it's substance addiction or behavioral addiction, the mechanism is the same. The substance or behavior is solving something. Usually, it's solving multiple things. Alcohol might be reducing social anxiety, numbing emotional pain, and providing temporary confidence. That's 3 functions. So telling someone to just stop drinking is asking them to give up their social anxiety management, their emotional regulation, and their confidence source, all at once, with nothing to replace it. That's not sustainable. This is why addiction recovery requires addressing the underlying issues, not just the behavior. What trauma is being numbed? What pain is being avoided? What need is not being met? Johann Hari, in his book, Chasing the Scream, argues that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. People become addicted not because the substance is irresistible, but because their life is unbearable. When you have connection, purpose, meaning, when your needs are being met in healthy ways, you don't need to escape. So addiction recovery isn't about white-knuckling abstinence, it's about building a life worth being present for. A life where the needs the substance was meeting are now met in other ways. This applies to all habit change. If your life is empty, stressful, lonely, purposeless, you're going to need coping mechanisms, and those mechanisms will probably be maladaptive. Not because you're weak, because you're surviving. So the real work isn't habit change, it's life change. Building a life where healthy behaviors are the natural response, where you don't need to numb, escape, or avoid. Because there's nothing to numb, escape, or avoid. Or because you have the resources to face what's there. Now, let's get personal. What's your habit that you've been trying to break? Really. Think about it. The one you've tried to quit a dozen times, the one you feel ashamed about, the one you hide from others. Got it? Now ask yourself, with total honesty and zero judgment, what is this habit doing for me? What problem is it solving? What feeling is it managing? What am I avoiding by doing this? What would I have to face if I stopped? These are hard questions. The answers might be uncomfortable. You might discover that your habit is protecting you from something you don't want to confront. A difficult emotion, a painful memory, an uncomfortable truth about your life. And that's okay. In fact, that's crucial. Because once you know what the habit is protecting you from, you can address that directly. You can heal the wound instead of numbing it. You can face the fear instead of avoiding it. You can fill the void instead of distracting from it. This is shadow work. Looking at the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, the needs you've been suppressing, the pain you've been running from, and having the courage to say, this is here, this is real, and I can handle it. Not by pushing it away, by integrating it. This is when habit change becomes transformation. Because you're not just changing behavior, you're changing your relationship with yourself. You're becoming someone who doesn't need maladaptive coping mechanisms, because you're facing life directly, with compassion, with resources, with support. That's the truth about bad habits. They're not the enemy. They're a messenger, telling you something needs attention. Listen to the message, then change the response. The extinction burst. Now I need to warn you about something that's going to happen when you try to break a habit. It's going to get worse before it gets better. This is called an extinction burst, and if you don't know it's coming, it will convince you that change is impossible. Here's what happens. You decide to quit a habit. Let's say checking your phone compulsively. For the first few days, it's hard but manageable. You're riding on motivation and willpower. Then, around day 3 to 7, something shifts. The urge becomes overwhelming, more intense than it ever was before. You think about it constantly. You're irritable. You're anxious. Every fiber of your being is screaming at you to just check the damn phone. And most people at this point give in. They think, see, I can't do this. The urge is too strong. I'm addicted. It's hopeless. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is your brain's last-ditch effort to get you to perform the behavior. This is the extinction burst. It's a well-documented phenomenon in behavioral psychology. When a behavior has been reinforced repeatedly and then stops being reinforced, there's a spike in the behavior right before it extinguishes. The classic study involved rats pressing a lever for food. While the food was coming, the rats pressed steadily. When the food stopped coming, the rats didn't just stop pressing, they pressed more, harder, faster, more frantically. Then, after that burst, the behavior finally extinguished. The same thing happens in humans. When you remove the reinforcement, when you stop giving in to the urge, your brain panics. Wait, this always worked before. Maybe I'm not doing it hard enough. Let me try really hard. So the urge intensifies. Your brain is not stupid. It's trying every trick it has to get you back to the behavior. It's throwing a tantrum. And if you don't know this is coming, you'll interpret the intensity as evidence that you can't change. But it's actually evidence that you are changing. The extinction burst is a sign that the neural pathway is weakening. Your brain is trying to reestablish it. If you can survive the burst without giving in, the urge will decrease significantly, not immediately. But within a few days to a week, you'll notice it's easier. The volume has turned down. So here's what to expect with different habit changes. Quitting smoking. The 3-day crisis point. Days 1 through 3, you're running on decision and determination. Day 3 to 7, the extinction burst hits. Intense cravings, irritability, physical discomfort. This is when most people relapse. If you can make it to day 7 without smoking, your chances of success increase dramatically. The nicotine is out of your system. The physical addiction is breaking. What remains is psychological, which is still hard, but different. Breaking phone addiction, the phantom vibrations. You'll feel your phone vibrate even when it didn't. You'll reach for it automatically, forget you put it away, then reach again. Minutes later, your hand will feel empty. You'll be bored in ways you haven't experienced in years. This peaks around day 5 to 10. Then it gradually eases. By week 3, you'll start to appreciate the space, the quiet, the presence, but you have to survive the burst. Changing sleep schedule. The 3 a.m. wide-awake nights. You go to bed earlier to wake up earlier. For the first few nights, you lie there unable to sleep, frustrated. Then, just when you think it's working, you wake up at 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep. Your body is fighting the new rhythm. This is the burst. If you stay consistent, keep the wake time consistent, get morning light, avoid naps, your body will adjust, usually within 2 weeks, but those 2 weeks are rough. Quitting sugar, the headaches and mood swings. Day 1, I got this. Day 2, mild headache, slight irritability. Day 3 to 5, intense cravings, headaches, fatigue, emotional volatility. This is the burst. Your brain is screaming for glucose. Day 6 to 10, it starts to ease. By week 2, your taste buds have adjusted and fruit tastes sweet again. But week 1 is hell. The key to surviving the extinction burst is knowing it's coming and having a plan. Here's the plan. 1. Expect it. Mark it on your calendar. Day 3 to 7, extinction burst. This will be hard. When it comes, you're not surprised, you're prepared. 2. Delay, don't deny. When the urge hits, don't tell yourself, I can never do this again. Tell yourself, I can do this in 10 minutes if I still want to. Then wait 10 minutes. Do something else. Usually, the urge passes. This is called urge surfing. The urge is like a wave. It rises, peaks, and falls. If you try to fight it or suppress it, it strengthens. If you just observe it and wait, it passes on its own. 3. Have a replacement ready. What will you do instead when the urge hits? If you're quitting social media, have a book ready. If you're quitting snacking, have a walk planned. If you're quitting smoking, have gum, water, deep breathing. The urge needs somewhere to go. Give it a healthier outlet. 4. Get support. Tell someone what you're doing. When the burst hits, text them. Call them. Hey, I'm in the extinction burst. This is really hard. Can you just talk to me for 5 minutes? Connection helps. It reminds you why you're doing this. 5. Remember, this is temporary. The burst lasts days, not months. You can do hard things for a few days. You've survived worse. This will pass. And on the other side, you're free. The extinction burst is the final boss. It's the brain's last attempt to maintain the status quo. If you can beat it, the habit breaks. But if you give in during the burst, you're reinforcing the habit at its strongest point. You're teaching your brain, if you throw a tantrum hard enough, I'll give in. And next time, the tantrum will be even worse. So stand firm, let the wave rise, let it peak, let it fall. Don't fight it, don't suppress it, just observe it. There's the urge. It's strong. I'm not going to act on it, I'm just going to let it be here. This is incredibly difficult, but it's the way through. The only way through. And on the other side is freedom. Trauma and habit formation. Now we're going to talk about something that most habit content completely ignores: trauma. And I need to be clear up front. This is a sensitive topic. If you've experienced trauma, and statistically most people have in some form, this might be uncomfortable. If at any point this feels like too much, it's okay to pause. But I'm including this because it's essential. Because for many people, the reason traditional habit advice doesn't work isn't because they lack discipline, it's because their nervous system is stuck in survival mode. And you can't build aspirational habits when your brain is just trying to keep you alive. So let's talk about what trauma actually is. Trauma isn't just bad things that happen to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. It's not the event. It's the response to the event that gets stuck in your system. Dr. Gabor Mate says it perfectly. Trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you in the absence of an empathetic witness. When something overwhelming happens, abuse, neglect, violence, loss, chronic stress, your nervous system activates survival responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. These are automatic, unconscious. Your body does this to protect you, and in the moment, they work. But sometimes, especially if the threat is prolonged or happens during childhood, these responses don't turn off. They become your default state. Your nervous system stays in high alert, even when you're safe. This is what we call a dysregulated nervous system. And when your nervous system is dysregulated, habits become incredibly difficult. Because your brain isn't in a state where it can build for the future, it's in a state where it's just surviving the present. Let me explain through the polyvagal theory. This is neuroscience developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. Your autonomic nervous system has 3 states: ventral vagal state, safety, and social engagement. This is your optimal state. You feel calm, connected, present. In this state, you can learn, create, plan, build habits. Your prefrontal cortex is online. You have access to executive function. Sympathetic state, mobilization. This is fight or flight. Your body is activated. Heart rate increases. Breathing quickens. Muscles tense. You're ready to fight a threat or run from it. In this state, you're not thinking clearly. You're reacting. Building habits? Impossible. You're in survival mode. Dorsal vagal state. Shutdown. This is freeze or collapse. Your body goes into conservation mode. You feel numb, disconnected, dissociated, depressed. This is your body's last resort when fight or flight aren't options. In this state, even basic functioning is hard. Getting out of bed, eating, showering, habits, not even on the radar. Now, for people without trauma, these states are temporary. Something stressful happens, you go into sympathetic, then you calm down and return to ventral vagal. But for people with trauma, you can get stuck in sympathetic or dorsal vagal. Your baseline is dysregulated. You're always a little activated, or always a little shut down. And in that state, traditional habit advice is useless. Just wake up at 5 a.m. and meditate. Your body is barely sleeping because you're hypervigilant. Just meal prep and eat healthy. You're using food as one of your only sources of comfort in a system that feels unsafe. Just build a morning routine. Mornings might be when your trauma symptoms are worst. Do you see the problem? The advice assumes a regulated nervous system. It assumes you're starting from ventral vagal. But if you're not, none of it works. So what do? First, recognize that this isn't a discipline problem. If your habits keep falling apart despite your best efforts, it might not be about the habits. It might be about your nervous system. And that's not a weakness. That's biology. Second, the first habit isn't productivity or health or success. The first habit is nervous system regulation, learning to bring your body back to safety. This is somatic work, body-based practices. Let me give you some. Vagal toning. Your vagus nerve is the main nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system. When it's toned, functioning well, you can regulate stress. When it's not, you stay stuck in activation or shutdown. Ways to tone the vagus nerve. Cold water on your face. This activates the dive reflex, which calms the nervous system. Humming or singing. The vibration stimulates the vagus nerve. Deep breathing, specifically exhales longer than inhales. 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. Gargling. Sounds weird, but it activates the muscles connected to the vagus nerve. These are small, accessible practices that physically shift your nervous system. Grounding techniques. When you're activated or dissociated, you're not present in your body. Grounding brings you back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. Name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. This brings your awareness into the present moment and out of the threat response. Physical grounding. Press your feet into the floor. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Touch something with texture. Your body needs to feel that it's here, now, and safe pendulation. This is a technique from somatic experiencing therapy. You don't try to stay in the difficult sensation or emotion. You move between the difficult sensation and a neutral or positive one. Feel the anxiety in your chest for a few seconds, then shift your attention to your feet on the ground, which feels neutral. Then back to the anxiety, then back to the feet. You're teaching your nervous system that it can move between states, that it doesn't have to stay stuck in activation. Orienting. When you're in a threat response, your vision narrows. You lose peripheral awareness. Orienting practice. Slowly move your head from side to side, taking in your environment. Notice what's around you. Notice that you're safe right now. This signals to your nervous system. We're not in danger. We can relax. These might sound too simple to matter. They're not. These are the practices that begin to re-regulate a dysregulated system. And once your system starts to regulate, then you can build other habits, but not before. Now, let's talk about PTSD and intrusive habit loops. PTSD is characterized by intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, hypervigilance, and avoidance. These are habit loops. Cue. Something reminds you of the trauma. Could be a smell, a sound, a situation, a feeling. Routine. Your body responds with a flashback, panic, dissociation, or avoidance. Reward. In the moment, avoidance feels like relief. Your brain learns, avoid this, feel safer. But avoidance makes the trauma worse over time because you never learn that you can survive the reminder without falling apart. So the trauma stays powerful. This is why exposure therapy works for PTSD. You gradually, safely expose yourself to trauma reminders while in a regulated state. You're breaking the habit loop by changing the response cue happens. But instead of panic or avoidance, you stay present, you regulate, you survive it, and your brain learns, oh, this reminder isn't actually dangerous. I can handle this. The habit loop weakens, but this requires professional support. This is not DIY territory. If you have PTSD, please work with a trauma-informed therapist. Now let's talk about habits in recovery. Whether you're recovering from addiction, an eating disorder, self-harm, or any other trauma-related pattern, habit formation is part of the healing process. But it looks different. You're not optimizing, you're stabilizing. The habits aren't about peak performance. They're about basic safety and regulation. Habits like eating regular meals, even if they're not healthy meals. Regularity matters more. Getting outside for a few minutes. Sunlight and fresh air help regulate circadian rhythms and mood. Connecting with one safe person. Even just a text. Connection is healing. Moving your body gently, not intense exercise. Just movement to discharge activation. These are recovery habits, and they're just as valuable, more valuable, than productivity habits. Because you can't build a life if you can't first build safety. There's a concept in trauma therapy called post-traumatic growth, the idea that trauma, when processed and integrated, can lead to profound growth. Not because trauma is good, it's not, but because the process of healing from trauma requires you to develop capacities you might not have developed otherwise: resilience, compassion, self-awareness, emotional regulation, meaning-making. These aren't consolation prizes. These are real strengths, and they can become the foundation for powerful, intentional habits. Habits built not on optimization, but on genuine self-care. Habits built not on achievement, but on healing. Habits built not on performance, but on presence. So if you have trauma, please hear this. You're not broken. You're not too damaged to change. You're not hopeless. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect you. The fact that it's protecting you from things that are no longer happening doesn't mean it's broken. It means it needs new information. It needs to learn that you're safe now, and you can teach it that. Through regulation practices, through therapy, through safe relationships, through small, consistent acts of self-compassion. And once your system begins to feel safe, the habits will come. Not through force, through flow, not through discipline, through alignment. Because you'll finally be building from a foundation of safety instead of survival. And that changes everything. The meaning crisis. Now we need to talk about something philosophical, because there's a problem with optimization culture that nobody's addressing. You can have perfect habits, perfect productivity, perfect health, and still feel empty. This is the meaning crisis. We're living in a time where we have more resources, more knowledge, more tools for self-improvement than any generation in history. And yet, rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide are rising. Loneliness is epidemic. People feel disconnected, purposeless, adrift. Why? Because we've optimized everything except meaning. We've turned ourselves into productivity machines. We track everything. We optimize everything. We habit stack and time block and life hack our way to, what? More output, more achievement, more boxes checked. But to what end? This is what philosophers call the hedonic treadmill. You achieve a goal. You feel good for a moment. Then you adapt to the new level and need the next goal. You get the promotion. You feel accomplished. Then it's normal, and you want the next promotion. You hit your fitness goal. You feel proud. Then it's your baseline, and you set a harder goal. You build the habit. You maintain the streak. Then it just becomes what you do, and you're chasing the next habit. The treadmill never stops, and at some point you have to ask, why am I running? Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote about this in Man's Search for Meaning. He said that the primary human drive isn't pleasure or power. It's meaning. We can endure almost anything if we have a reason for enduring it, but without meaning, even comfort becomes unbearable. He observed that in the concentration camps, the people who survived weren't necessarily the strongest or healthiest. They were the ones who had something to survive for. A person to reunite with. A work to complete. A future to create. Meaning kept them alive. And in modern life, we're materially comfortable but existentially starving. We have everything we need to survive, but nothing compelling to survive for. So we fill the void with optimization. We convince ourselves that if we can just be productive enough, healthy enough, successful enough, we'll feel fulfilled. But fulfillment doesn't come from optimization. It comes from meaning. So here's the uncomfortable question. What are you building habits for? Really? Not the surface answer, the deep answer. Are you building habits to be productive? Why do you want to be productive? To achieve what? And why does that matter? Are you building habits to be healthy? Why do you want to be healthy? To live longer? And what are you living for? Are you building habits to be successful? Why do you want success? What will success give you? And will it actually give you that? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are the questions that determine whether your habits lead to fulfillment or just burnout in a prettier package. Because if your habits aren't connected to something larger than yourself, they're just sophisticated distraction. They're busy work. And eventually, you'll hit a wall where you realize, I've done everything right, and I still don't feel like my life matters. That's the meaning crisis. So what do? You need to connect your habits to your values, not your goals. Your values. Goals are destinations. Values are directions. Goals end. Values continue. You achieve a goal and it's over. You live a value and it's ongoing. So instead of, I want to lose 20 pounds, ask, why does that matter to me? Maybe the value is health, vitality, being present for your kids, having energy to do what you love. Those values never end. There's no finish line where you've completed vitality. It's a lifelong direction, and that's sustainable. Instead of, I want to be successful, ask, what does success mean to me? Maybe the value is contribution impact, creativity, freedom. Those values guide your daily choices, not just your long-term goals. This is what existential psychology is about: finding meaning, not in achieving specific outcomes, but in living aligned with what matters. And here's where it gets spiritual, for some people. For many, meaning comes from something transcendent: religion, spirituality, connection to something larger than the self. This isn't about pushing any particular belief system. It's about recognizing that humans have always sought meaning beyond the material. And when we cut that off, when we reduce life to optimization and achievement, we lose something essential. Legacy is another source of meaning. Not legacy as in being remembered. Legacy as in, what impact does my life have beyond me? What am I leaving behind? What am I contributing to? Am I making the world slightly better? Am I helping someone? Am I creating something that matters? Habits connected to legacy have deep meaning. You're not just exercising to look good. You're exercising so you can be healthy enough to be there for your family. You're not just building a business to make money. You're building something that employs people, serves customers, creates value. You're not just creating art for yourself. You're creating something that might move someone, help someone, connect with someone. That's different. That's meaning. And death awareness, as morbid as it sounds, is a powerful meaning maker. When you remember that your time is limited, you get clear on what matters. Steve Jobs said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose." Death clarifies. It removes the trivial. It highlights the essential. So one practice, the regret minimization framework. Imagine yourself at 80 years old, looking back on your life. What would you regret not doing? What would you regret not trying? What would you wish you'd prioritized? That tells you what actually matters, and your habits should reflect that. Not what Instagram says matters, not what productivity culture says matters, what actually matters to you. So before you build another habit, ask, is this moving me toward a life I'd be proud of? Or is this just another optimization that doesn't actually fulfill me? And if it's the latter, pause. Because the most disciplined thing you can do is not build the habit. It's ask why you're building it in the first place. Optimization without purpose is just sophisticated restlessness. Habits without meaning are just routines that eventually feel empty. But habits connected to what genuinely matters, those are transformative. Those create a life worth living, not just a life that looks good on paper. Act 5. The Systems Revolution. Systems versus Goals. We're going to talk about one of the most important mindset shifts in habit formation, and it comes from Scott Adams, creator of Dilbert. In his book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, Adams makes a controversial claim. Goals are for losers. Let me explain why he's right. A goal is a specific outcome. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to write a book. I want to start a business that makes 6 figures. These are goals. They're specific, measurable, motivating, and they're problematic. Here's why goals don't work. First, goals are binary. You either achieve them or you don't, which means most of the time, you're failing. If your goal is to lose 20 pounds, every day that you haven't lost 20 pounds yet, you're not there. You're in a state of not yet success. That's psychologically draining. You're constantly measuring yourself against a future state and finding yourself lacking. Second, goals are temporary. You achieve the goal, you feel good for a moment, then, what? You lost the 20 pounds. Great. Now what? Do you gain it back? Do you set another goal? Do you feel aimless? This is post-achievement depression. Athletes experience this after winning championships. Entrepreneurs experience this after selling their company. They worked toward a goal for years, achieved it, and then felt empty. Because the goal gave them purpose, and now it's gone. Third, goals create an all-or-nothing mentality. If you're pursuing a goal and something disrupts your progress, you feel like you've failed. I wanted to write every day this month, but I missed 3 days. I've already failed. So you give up entirely. The goal framework doesn't account for reality, for variability, for life happening. Now here's the alternative. Systems. A system is a process you follow regardless of the outcome. It's not about achieving a specific result. It's about following a practice. So instead of, I want to lose 20 pounds, the system is, I eat protein and vegetables at every meal. Instead of, I want to write a book, the system is, I write for 30 minutes every morning. Instead of, I want a 6-figure business, the system is, I create value for customers every day. Do you see the difference? The system is what you do. The goal is what you hope happens as a result. Here's why systems are superior. Systems are ongoing. They never end. You don't complete eating protein and vegetables. You just keep doing it, which means you're never in a state of failure. You're just in a state of practice. Systems create identity. If you write every morning, you're a writer, whether you've published a book or not. If you eat well consistently, you're someone who values health. Whether you've hit a specific weight or not, if you create value for customers, you're an entrepreneur. Whether you've hit 6 figures or not, the identity is in the practice, not the outcome. And identity is more powerful than goals. Systems are resilient. If you miss a day, the system continues. You just pick it back up tomorrow. There's no binary success, failure, just continuing or not continuing. Systems accumulate. Every day you follow the system, you're making deposits. And over time, those deposits compound. You don't know exactly when you'll see results, but you know that if you follow the system, results are inevitable. This is the compound effect. Small actions, repeated consistently, create exponential results over time. Here's a perfect example. Goal: I want to run a marathon. Problem: you might train for months, get injured, and not run the marathon. According to the goal, you failed. System: I'm someone who runs regularly. You run. Sometimes it's a mile, sometimes it's 10 miles, sometimes you take a rest week. But you're a runner. The identity is there. And eventually, if you want to, you can run a marathon. But that's just a milestone within the system, not the point of the system. Another example. Goal: I want to read 50 books this year. Problem: what if you read 45? Did you fail? What if you read 50 books but don't remember any of them because you were rushing? System: I read for 30 minutes before bed. You read some books are long, some are short. Some months you read more, some less. But you're a reader. The habit is there. And over time, you'll have read way more than you would have without the system. Now, I want to be nuanced here. Goals aren't useless. They can provide direction. They can help you choose which system to build. If you want to run a marathon, that helps you decide to build a running system rather than a swimming system. So goals are useful for choosing direction. But once you've chosen the direction, forget the goal and focus on the system. Aim for the direction, but measure by the practice. Here's how to apply this. Take any goal you currently have. Now ask, what system would make that goal inevitable? If the goal is weight loss, the system might be whole foods at every meal, movement every day, adequate sleep. If the goal is career advancement, the system might be learn one new skill per quarter, network with one person per week, deliver exceptional work consistently. If the goal is financial freedom, the system might be save 20% of income, invest automatically, learn about money weekly. See how the goal points you toward a system, but the system is what you actually do? And here's the beautiful part. Systems often lead to outcomes better than your original goals. You set a goal to lose 20 pounds, but you build a health system. You lose the 20 pounds. But you also gain energy, confidence, strength, longevity. The system delivered more than the goal could have specified. You set a goal to write a book, but you build a writing system. You write the book, but you also become a better thinker, develop a creative practice, discover your voice. The system delivers more than the goal. This is the magic of system thinking. You're not optimizing for a single outcome. You're optimizing for a way of being that produces multiple outcomes. So here's your shift. Stop asking, what do I want to achieve? Start asking, who do I want to become, and what systems does that person have? Because systems create identity, and identity drives behavior, and behavior creates outcomes. Goals skip straight to outcomes, and hope behavior follows. It doesn't. Systems build from the ground up, and they're sustainable. Because you're not chasing something outside yourself. You're practicing something that's already part of you. That's the revolution. From goal chasing to system building, from outcome focused to process focused, from temporary to permanent. That's how you actually change. The minimum viable habit, MVH. Now let's talk about a concept I'm stealing from startup culture and applying to habits. The minimum viable product, MVP, is a core concept in entrepreneurship. You don't build the complete, perfect product before launching. You build the smallest version that provides value, launch it, get feedback, and iterate. This prevents you from wasting years building something nobody wants. The same principle applies to habits. Except instead of minimum viable product, it's minimum viable habit MVH. Here's the concept. When building a new habit, you want to find the smallest version that still counts. The version that's so small it's almost embarrassing, but that still maintains the identity you're building. This is related to the 2-minute rule, but it goes deeper, because the 2-minute rule is about starting. The MVH is about what counts as success. Let me give you examples. Exercise habit. Normal goal. I'll work out for an hour, 5 days a week. Minimum viable habit. I'll do 1 push-up. 1. That's it. Sounds ridiculous, right? But here's why it works. One push-up maintains the identity of, I'm someone who exercises. One push-up keeps the streak alive. One push-up destroys the, I don't have time excuse. You always have time for one push-up. And most importantly, one push-up often leads to more, because the hardest part is starting. Once you're down on the floor, you usually do more than one. But even if you don't, even if you literally do one push-up and stop, you've succeeded. You kept your commitment. Writing habit. Normal goal, I'll write 1,000 words a day. Minimum viable habit, I'll write one sentence. One sentence counts, because one sentence maintains the identity of I'm a writer. One sentence keeps the practice alive, and one sentence often becomes a paragraph, which becomes a page. But even if it doesn't, you succeeded. Reading habit. Normal goal, I'll read for an hour before bed. Minimum viable habit, I'll read one page. One page counts, because it maintains the identity. It keeps the habit alive, and it's so low friction that you can do it even on your worst days. Now, here's what people get wrong about this. They think the MVH is what you should do every day forever. It's not. The MVH is your floor, your minimum. It's what you do on bad days. On good days, you do more. And you should. But you never go below the MVH. This creates a range. Floor, one push-up, ceiling, full workout. Most days, you'll be somewhere in the middle. But you never fall below the floor, and that's what builds consistency. Because consistency isn't about intensity. It's about continuity. It's better to do one push-up every day for a year than to do 100 push-ups once a week for a month and then quit. The one push-up builds the identity, builds the neural pathway, builds the streak. The 100 push-ups once a week builds nothing sustainable. This is counterintuitive in achievement culture. We're taught that more is better, that intensity matters, that you should always push harder. But for habit formation, that's wrong. Especially in the beginning. In the beginning, the goal is not performance, it's presence. Just showing up, just doing the thing, even minimally, because showing up is what wires the habit. Here's a case study. Stephen Guise wrote a book called Mini Habits, where he documented his own experiment. He wanted to build an exercise habit, but he'd failed many times before. Every time he tried to commit to a big workout routine, he'd quit within weeks, so he tried something different. He committed to doing one push-up per day, just one. He figured he couldn't fail at that. It was too easy, and he didn't fail. He did one push-up every day. But here's what happened. Most days, he did more than one. Because once he was down there, he'd think, might as well do a few more. And sometimes those few more turned into a full workout. But even on the days where it was literally just one, he succeeded. He kept the identity. He kept the streak. And over time, that one push-up habit grew into a consistent exercise practice, not through force. Through lowering the barrier so much that consistency became inevitable. That's the power of the MVH. Now, this requires letting go of ego, because one push-up doesn't feel impressive. It doesn't feel like you're making progress. It doesn't give you bragging rights. But ego is the enemy of consistency. If you need every workout to be impressive, you'll skip workouts on days when you can't be impressive. If you need every writing session to produce brilliance, you'll avoid writing on days when you're not feeling brilliant. The MVH says, forget impressive, just show up, do the minimum, keep the practice alive. That's enough, more than enough. Because showing up is the hardest part. Once you've shown up, you've already won. So here's your assignment. For whatever habit you're building, define your MVH. What's the absolute minimum that still counts? What can you commit to doing even on your worst day? That's your floor. And commit to never going below it. On good days, do more. Celebrate that. On bad days, do the minimum. Celebrate that too. Because both are success. Both are keeping the habit alive. And that's what compounds over time. Not intensity. Consistency. Not perfection. Presence. Not impressive performances. Daily practice. That's the MVH. Act 6. Practical Implementation. The Habit Audit Masterclass. We've spent time exploring philosophy and science. Now it's time to make it personal. It's time to do the actual work, right now, with me. This is the habit audit, and if you do this honestly, it will be one of the most valuable exercises you've ever done, so get a piece of paper, or open a document, because we're going through this together. Step 1. Current state mapping. First, we need to see what's actually there, not what you wish was there, what's actually there. Time tracking. Reveal. Think about yesterday, a typical day, walk through it hour by hour. What did you actually do? Not what you planned to do, what you did. 6 a.m. Hit snooze, checked phone, scrolled for 15 minutes. 7 a.m. Rushed to get ready, skipped breakfast. 8 a.m. Commute, listened to podcast. 9 a.m. Work, but first checked email and social media for 20 minutes. Go through your whole day. Be honest, brutally honest. Where did your time actually go? Now, look at the pattern. How much time went to things that matter to you? How much went to default behaviors, scrolling, distraction, reaction? How much went to other people's priorities versus your own? This isn't about judgment. It's about data. You can't change what you don't see. Energy audit. Now, same day, but focus on energy, not time. When did you feel most alive? Most focused? Most like yourself? When did you feel drained, depleted, like you were just going through motions? Mark the high energy moments. Mark the low energy moments. This tells you when your capacity is highest. And that's when you should schedule your most important habits. Don't try to meditate at 3 p.m. if that's your energy crash time. Don't try to do creative work at 8 p.m. if you're fried by then. Work with your energy, not against it. Values versus reality. Gap analysis. Now, write down your top 5 values, the things that actually matter to you. Not what you think should matter, what actually matters. Maybe it's health, family, creativity, learning, connection. Whatever they are, write them down. Now look at your time audit. How much of your actual time and energy went toward those values? This is the gap. And this gap is what we're here to close. If you say family matters, but you spent 2 hours scrolling and 15 minutes with family, there's a gap. If you say health matters, but you spent 0 time moving and 30 minutes eating fast food, there's a gap. The gap isn't about judgment, it's about alignment. And closing that gap is what habit formation is really about. Step 2. The Keep, Kill, Create Matrix. Now we're going to categorize 3 columns: keep, kill, create. Keep, what's actually working. Look at your life right now. What habits are you already doing that serve you? What's working? Maybe you already drink water first thing in the morning. Maybe you already call your mom every Sunday. Maybe you already read before bed. Write them down. These are your anchors, your foundation. Don't change these. Celebrate them. You're doing more right than you think. Kill. What's sabotaging you? Now, what habits are actively harming you? Not neutral. Actively harmful. Maybe it's scrolling social media for an hour before bed and wrecking your sleep. Maybe it's skipping meals and then binge eating. Maybe it's saying yes to everything and burning out. Maybe it's working until midnight and never resting. Write them down. These are your targets. But remember, you don't just kill a habit. You replace it. So, we'll come back to that. Create. Strategic gaps. Finally, what's missing? What habit, if you built it, would create the biggest positive impact? This is your keystone habit. The one thing that would cascade into multiple benefits. For some people, it's exercise. For others, it's sleep. For others, it's a morning routine that sets the tone for the day. For others, it's a weekly planning session that creates clarity. What's yours? Don't list 10 things. One thing. The one habit that would change everything. Write it down. Step 3. The ripple analysis. Now look at your create habit. The keystone you identified. Ask, if I build this habit, What else would improve? Really think about the ripples. If your keystone is exercise, energy improves, productivity improves, sleep improves, mood improves, confidence improves, relationships improve, stress decreases, decision-making improves. If your keystone is a morning routine, you start the day with wins, momentum builds, you're less reactive, you're more intentional, you have time for what matters. Alignment improves. If your keystone is sleep, recovery improves, health improves, willpower improves, habits get easier, mood improves, relationships improve. The ripple tells you this is the right choice. If building this one habit would improve 5 other areas, you've found your leverage point. That's where you focus. Step 4. The honest obstacle inventory. Step 4. The honest obstacle inventory. Now, the uncomfortable part. You know what habit you want to build. You might have tried before. So ask yourself, what will actually prevent me from doing this? Not theoretical obstacles, real ones. Be honest. I'll be tired. I'll forget. I'll prioritize work instead. I'll convince myself I don't have time. I'll feel uncomfortable and quit. Whatever your real obstacles are, write them down, because now you can plan for them. If I'll be tired is the obstacle, you don't rely on energy. You build in a minimum version. If I'll forget is the obstacle, you don't rely on memory. You build visual cues. If I'll prioritize work is the obstacle, you schedule the habit before work starts. If I'll convince myself I don't have time, you prove to yourself it takes 2 minutes. Pre-solving obstacles is how you actually succeed. Most people skip this step. They commit to the habit with motivation. Then the obstacle appears and they're surprised. Don't be surprised. Expect the obstacles. Plan for them. That's the difference between hoping and succeeding. The 30-60-90-day blueprint. Now you have your audit. You know what you're building. Let's map the next 90 days, not vaguely. Specifically, because 90 days is the minimum time to know if a habit is truly integrating. Why 90 days? 30 days is not enough. You're still running on motivation. 60 days is when it starts to feel real, but it's still fragile. 90 days is when you know, is this habit sticking or am I forcing it? So we're committing to 90 days, 3 months, 1/4 of a year. That's your experiment. Month 1, days 1 to 30. Foundation. Month 1 is not about intensity. It's about establishing the pattern. Your focus. One keystone habit only. You identified it in the audit. This is the only new habit you're building. Not 3 habits. 1. Because 1 done consistently is infinitely better than 3 done sporadically. The commitment. The minimum viable version of this habit. Every single day. If it's exercise, 1 push-up. If it's writing, 1 sentence. If it's meditation, 1 minute. That's your floor. You never go below it. But on good days, you do more. Environmental preparation. Spend day 1 preparing your environment. If it's exercise, lay out your clothes, clear space, remove obstacles. If it's writing, create a dedicated document, set up your space, eliminate distractions. If it's meditation, choose your spot, set up your cushion, make it inviting. You're making the habit as easy as possible. Tracking system setup. Get a piece of paper, make a grid, 30 boxes, or use an app, or a wall calendar. Every day you do the habit, you mark it. Visual tracking is powerful. Seeing the chain of X's builds momentum, don't break the chain, becomes your mantra. Identity language. Shift. Stop saying, I'm trying to exercise. Start saying, I'm someone who moves their body daily. Stop saying, I want to write more. Start saying, I'm a writer. The language matters. It shifts from aspiration to identity, and identity drives behavior. Weekly reviews. Every Sunday, review the week. What worked? What didn't? What needs to adjust? Don't wait until the end of the month. Iterate weekly. Critical checkpoints in month 1. Day 3. The motivation crash. You wake up and you don't feel like it anymore. This is normal. This is expected. Do the minimum version. Don't negotiate. Day 7. The first week milestone. You made it a week. Celebrate that, seriously. Acknowledge it. You're further than most people get. Day 14. The novelty is gone. It's not exciting anymore. It's just a thing you do good. That means it's becoming routine. Stay the course. Day 21. The myth date. You'll hear 21 days to form a habit. You might expect it to feel automatic now. It won't. That's okay. You're only 1/3 through. Keep going. Day 30. Month 1, complete. You did it. 30 days. Review. What did you learn? What surprised you? What's working? Celebrate. Then move to month 2. Month 2, days 31 to 60, expansion. Month 2 is about building on the foundation. Your focus. Add one complementary habit, not another random habit. A habit that supports your keystone. If your keystone is exercise, maybe you add meal prep. If your keystone is writing, maybe you add reading for 15 minutes. If your keystone is meditation, maybe you add journaling. The second habit makes the first habit easier or more effective. Habit stack. Building. Connect the new habit to something you already do. After I exercise, I will prep my lunch. After I write, I will read for 15 minutes. After I meditate, I will journal for 5 minutes. You're building a sequence social accountability activation. Tell someone what you're doing, not for validation, for accountability. Check in with them weekly. I completed week 5 still going. That external touch point keeps you honest. Troubleshooting and pivoting. By now, you've hit obstacles. Some days are hard. Some days you skip. This is when you troubleshoot. If you're skipping mornings, try evenings. If you're skipping at home, try at work. If you're getting bored, add variety small adjustments, not complete overhaul. Celebrating small wins. You're 45 days in, 60 days in. That's remarkable. Celebrate it. Treat yourself. Tell someone. Acknowledge your progress. This isn't self-indulgent. It's neurologically important. Celebration releases dopamine, which reinforces the habit. Critical checkpoints in month 2. Day 40. The second wind. Something shifts here. The habit feels slightly easier. You're not thinking about it as much. This is the neural pathway forming. Day 50. The test life throws something at you. Travel, stress, illness. This tests whether your habit is robust or fragile. If you maintain the minimum, you're robust. If you drop it entirely, you need more structure. Day 60. 2 months. You're at the average habit formation timeline. For simple habits, this is when automation clicks. For complex habits, it's still fragile but getting there. Review. What's automatic? What still requires effort? Month 3. Days 61 to 90. Integration. Month 3 is about solidifying. Your focus. Third habit if ready. Only add a third habit if the first 2 are truly feeling automatic. If they're still requiring significant effort, stay with 2. There's no rush. Better to have 2 solid habits than 3 shaky ones. System refinement. By now, you've learned a lot about yourself. What times work best? What obstacles are recurring? What motivates you? Refine your system based on what you've learned. Adjust timing. Adjust environment. Adjust minimum versions. You're customizing the system to you. Automation. Where possible, look for ways to make the habits even easier. Set up automatic reminders. Prepare things the night before. Batch-related tasks. The less you have to think, the more automatic it becomes. Planning for maintenance. Month 4 is coming. You won't be in building mode anymore. You'll be in living with these habits mode. Plan for that. How will you maintain when the experiment is over? What's your long-term tracking look like? What's your recovery protocol if you slip? Assessing what's truly automatic. The test. Could you do this habit even on your worst day? If yes, it's automatic. If no, it's still volitional. Automatic habits don't require willpower. they're just what you do. Anything that still requires effort might need more time, and that's okay. Critical checkpoints in month 3, day 66, the average automation point. For many people, this is when simple habits click into true automation, but don't expect magic. It's gradual. Day 75, the 3/4 mark. You're almost there. This is when people often slip because they think they're done. Don't ease up now. Finish strong. Day 90, completion. You did it. 90 days. Review everything. What habits are automatic? What habits need more time? What did you learn about yourself? What will you do differently for the next habit? This isn't the end. It's the beginning of living with these habits. But you've proven to yourself you can do this, and that changes everything. The real secret. We're almost at the end. 3 hours of content, dozens of strategies, hundreds of insights, and now I'm going to tell you something that might seem anticlimactic, but it's the most important thing I can say. Here it is. There is no secret, no hack, no shortcut, no magic formula. Habits are simple, not easy, but simple. Choose the behavior. Do it consistently. Let time work its magic. That's it. Everything else we've covered, the neuroscience, the psychology, the strategies, it's all just ways to support those 3 steps. But the core is simple. And that's actually good news. Why no secret is liberating. If there were a secret, you'd have to find it. And maybe you don't have access to it. Maybe it's only available to special people with special resources. But there's no secret, which means there's no unfair advantage. Everyone has the same tools, time, attention, repetition. You already have everything you need. You're not missing anything. You're not lacking anything. You just need to do the thing, consistently, for longer than feels comfortable. That's it. The compound effect requires patience. We live in an instant gratification world. 2-day shipping instant downloads. Next day results. And we've been conditioned to expect everything quickly. But habits don't work on that timeline. They work on the timeline of nature. Seeds don't become trees overnight. Bodies don't transform in a week. Skills don't develop in a month. And habits don't integrate in 21 days. They take time. And the only way through is through. No shortcut, no hack, just consistent action over an uncomfortable amount of time. And that's not a bug, that's a feature. Because if it were quick, everyone would do it. And the results wouldn't be meaningful. The meaning comes from the commitment. From the days when you didn't want to do it, but did it anyway. From the times you failed and got back up. From the patience you cultivated while waiting for results. That's what makes transformation valuable. Not the outcome. The process of becoming someone who can stick with the process. Why this is actually good news. If success required talent, you might not have it. If it required money, you might not have enough. If it required connections, you might not have access. But it doesn't require any of that. It requires consistency. And consistency is a choice. A choice you make every single day. No one can do it for you. But also, nothing can stop you from doing it. You don't need permission. You don't need resources. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need to start and keep going. That's the only unfair advantage. Starting today. The asymmetric returns of starting. Every day you delay is a day of compound growth you lose. Not because you're behind someone else, but because you're delaying your own transformation. Start today, and in 90 days, you'll have 90 days of practice. Start when you're ready, and in 90 days, you'll still be getting ready. The person who starts imperfectly today will be further ahead than the person who waits for perfect conditions every time. Because perfect conditions never come. There's always a reason to wait. Too busy, too tired, too stressed, not the right time. But here's the truth. It's never the right time. You just decide it's the right time, and then you make it work. That's what action does. It creates conditions. It doesn't wait for them. Permission slip. I want to give you explicit permission for something. Permission to start messy. Permission to fail often. permission to be imperfect, because the alternative is waiting for perfection. And perfection is just fear wearing a disguise. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to know exactly how it's going to go. You don't need to be confident, you just need to start. And figure it out as you go. That's what everyone who's ever succeeded has done. They didn't have a perfect plan. They had a direction and a willingness to adjust. So start, messily, imperfectly, uncertain, start anyway. The final truth. You've spent 3 hours with me. You've learned the science, the strategies, the psychology, but none of it matters if you don't do anything with it. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. And I don't want to entertain you. I want to transform you. But I can't do that. Only you can. So here's my ask. Close this video and do 2 minutes of your chosen habit. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not Monday. Not when you feel ready. Now. 2 minutes. That's all. Because that 2 minutes is the beginning of everything. That's the first deposit in the compound interest account. That's the first step in the 20-year journey. That's you becoming who you're meant to be. So don't wait. Don't think about it. Don't come back to this later. Do it now, 2 minutes. Go. Beyond self-improvement. Before we end, I need to address something. We've spent 3 hours talking about optimization, about improvement, about becoming better, and all of that matters. But I don't want you to miss something crucial. You're already enough, right now, as you are without perfect habits, without optimization, without achievement. You're enough. Because here's what the self-improvement industry won't tell you. There's a difference between growth and worth. Growth is what you do. Worth is what you are. And your worth is not contingent on your habits. You're not more valuable because you meditate daily. You're not less valuable because you struggle. You're inherently valuable. Period. When optimization becomes obsession, self-improvement can become toxic. When you're always fixing yourself, you're implying you're broken. When you're always optimizing, you're implying you're not enough. When you're always striving, you're implying arrival will bring peace. It won't. Because there's no arrival. There's only the next thing to optimize. And if you make your worth contingent on achievement, you'll never feel worthy. So here's the balance. Grow because you love yourself, not because you hate yourself. Build habits because you want to express your potential, not because you're trying to escape your inadequacy. Improve because growth is beautiful, not because stagnation is shameful. The enoughness principle. There's a concept in Buddhism. Just this. Right now, just this moment, is enough. You don't need to be more, do more, achieve more. You can rest in the present and be complete. That doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you stop growing from a place of lack. You grow from a place of abundance. From, I'm enough and I'm curious what I might become. Not, I'm not enough, so I need to become more. The first is sustainable, joyful, life-giving. The second is exhausting, shame-driven, soul-crushing. Habits as self-expression, not self-fixing. What if habits aren't about fixing what's broken? What if they're about expressing what's already whole? You exercise not because your body is wrong, but because movement is how your body wants to express itself. You create not because you're lacking, but because creation is how your soul wants to express itself. You connect not because you're incomplete, but because connection is how love wants to express itself. This is a radically different framing, and it changes everything. Because now habits aren't a burden, they're a joy. They're how you get to be fully yourself. Legacy mindset, habits that serve others. The most meaningful habits aren't about you. They're about what you contribute. Habits of patience with your children, habits of presence with your partner, habits of service to your community, habits of creation that benefits others. These habits aren't about self-improvement, they're about love. And love is the point, not productivity, not optimization, not achievement. Love. How you love yourself enough to care for your body, your mind, your spirit. How you love others enough to show up, to be present, to contribute. That's what makes habits meaningful. Generational habit transmission. The habits you build don't just affect you. They affect everyone who watches you. Your kids learn habits by watching you, not by listening to you. If you model self-care, they learn self-care. If you model workaholism, they learn workaholism. If you model curiosity, they learn curiosity. You're not just building habits for yourself, you're modeling a way of being for the next generation. That's legacy, not what you achieve, how you live. The invitation to rest. Finally, I want to give you permission to rest. Yes, build habits. Yes, grow. Yes, become. But also, rest. Be. Exist without producing. You're not a machine. You're a human. And being human means seasons of effort and seasons of rest, seasons of building and seasons of being. Don't optimize yourself into exhaustion. Build a life where rest is sacred, where doing nothing is just as valuable as doing something. Because it is. You are valuable whether you're productive or not, whether you're optimized or not, whether you're achieving or not. You're valuable because you exist. Remember that. The final challenge. We've reached the end. 3 hours. From the pink elephant to this moment. You've learned about the paradoxes, the science, the shadow work, the systems, the mastery. And now comes the moment that determines whether any of this matters. Your assignment. 1 habit. Starting now, not tomorrow, not Monday, not when conditions are perfect. Now. Choose the habit. Define the minimum viable version. Do 2 minutes of it right now. Then commit to 90 days. 90 days of showing up. 90 days of being imperfect. 90 days of learning about yourself. That's it. That's the entire game. The commitment. Say this out loud. I commit to habit for the next 90 days. I will do the minimum version every single day. I will not judge myself. I will not quit. I will show up. That's your contract with yourself. Report back. In 90 days, wherever you are, take a moment. Reflect on who you were when you started. Reflect on who you are now. Notice the difference. Not just in the habit, in yourself. Because that's what this is really about. Not the habit. The person you become through building the habit. The deeper truth. Habits are not the destination. They're the vehicle. The destination is a life that feels aligned, meaningful, fully lived. A life where you're not constantly fighting yourself, where you're not living on autopilot, where you're the conscious creator of your experience. That's what's possible, not through perfection, through practice. Daily, imperfect, committed practice. Closing wisdom. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. But I want to go deeper than that. You are what you repeatedly do. So choose carefully what you repeat, because you're not just forming habits. You're forming yourself. Every action is a brushstroke. Over days, weeks, years, decades, those brushstrokes become the masterpiece of your life. So make them intentional. Make them beautiful. Make them yours. You have everything you need. You've always had everything you need. Now go build something remarkable, not for anyone else. For yourself. For the life you deserve to live. For the person you're becoming. Go. Start now. Start small. Stay consistent. And in 20 years, you'll look back at this moment as the moment everything changed. Not because of what I taught you, but because of what you did with it. That's the real secret. You already have it. Now use it. Thank you for these 3 hours. Now go live the next 3 hours differently. And the next, and the next. That's transformation. That's the habit paradox. That's your life. Make it extraordinary.